Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Coming in with another test. 1, 2, 3. Alright, I think we're ready to get started. I'm gonna let that song carry us out. And pop in. Gonna go ahead and mute my music coming back at me. And boom. We're here. Then we go here. And we're streaming. Welcome to Twitching with Tristenkw5. First stream of 2025. Technically supposed to be the last stream of last year, but whatever. It makes more sense to really do this kind of a stream. This kind of a stream at the beginning of 2025, just to make sure you get enough time to wrap up everything that you might be interested in. So. For whatever reason, it just feels like I should just do it a little bit earlier. But really, January 1st, 2nd, 3rd is like the sweet spot. Anyway. Oof. At some point, I'm going to have to grab a drink, but that's fine. Yeah, let's get started. So this is going to be me going through 3 big top 10 lists. Or top 10 lists. This is going to be me going through my favorite shows, movies, whatever in between, if it's like internet content of the year 2024, and then we'll do anime, and then we'll wrap up with the big one, my most important games, top 10 games of the year, at least in my mind, or the one that I at least feel it matters the most in terms of my opinions. Kind of. So we're going from like least important to most important, but even then, you know, it's for fun, and it's for me mostly, just to kind of like have this stuff in mind. This is going well, so I don't need to have... I've got chat open over on the right, even though, you know, it won't be used much, but that's fine. That's not the point. With that said, let me open it on my phone too real quick so that I can message anybody who is in chat easily without having to change my whole setup here. So, what you're looking at on the screen is We're going to be using Tier Maker for the shows and anime. And, well, no. We're going to be using Tier Maker for the shows and video games. And then for the anime, I'm going to use a combination of other sites to kind of present it better. Really, I could probably just do anime the same way I do the other two. But I have some reasons why I don't. Those reasons, not set in stone. Not really, I don't know, it just feels the way that I do it. There are reasons for me to do it the way I do. I don't really know. Okay, let's get started, because this process usually takes longer than I expected to. I think last year, the whole stream lasted 4 hours. So this is live deliberation is the thing. So this isn't just me doing my top 10. I'm going to be going over, not in detail necessarily, but I'm going to be talking about just about everything I watched, played, or animated this year, even if it's not going to make the top 10. So I keep up with, at least as far as anime and video games, I do a pretty good job of keeping up with everything I've played or watched. When it comes to shows and TV and movies, that's a little bit more hit or miss. I kind of do whatever. I do my best to be like, oh yeah, I saw that, and then put it on the list, and then we'll just go with that. And even if it doesn't make the top 10, I'll at least give it like a quick honorable mention, or just a mention, or a, you know, whatever makes sense for that category. So it won't just be the top 10 being ordered, well, but only the top 10 will be ordered. Everything below that will just be kind of like thrown into like a general tier of how much I liked it. And we'll go from there. If you have any questions, post it in chat. If you have anything that you think I missed, post it in chat, and I'll talk about it. Most likely, if it's not on one of these lists, I either didn't play it or I didn't watch it. And I even have a category for that, in case, just because, like, if there's stuff that I expect people might wonder my opinion on, then I would have also added it to the list. But if you have something that's not here, definitely throw it out, and I will give my quick opinion and or reason why it's not here. So we're starting with TV shows and movies, or, you know, just shows in general, since streaming is such a big thing. This is everything that I watched in 2024 that I thought was like not just like a random YouTube channel, even though I should really start doing like YouTube channels that I subscribe to this year should get added to this list really, but that's a lot harder for me to find that data to confirm that it was stuff that I added in 2024, or at least I haven't gone down that route. But I'm probably going to do that next year, because YouTube is just so much more of my like watching. It makes a lot more sense to do that. And I do have one YouTube related thing on here, but really the rest of this is all streaming or movies. So we're just going to go down the list, throw stuff around as I go. I don't want to spoil things necessarily, so the top 10 aren't going to be ordered. I'm just going to throw stuff up there as I see fit, and then we're going to order the top 10 at the end. Alright, with that, let's get started. So, I'm just going to quickly say, we're going to start from the left and go right. At least as far as just getting these things into tiers. And this is movies and shows. Movies and shows. The Penguin is going to be in my top 10. Where in my top 10? Let's find out together. The Penguin was a lot better than I thought it was, considering I didn't like, or the Batman movie that it spun off from, I was kind of like meh on. I thought it was fine to good. So the Penguin was a lot better than I expected, considering how I felt about that Batman movie. And we'll talk about it more when I start. Anything that ends up in top 10, I'm not going to talk about that much, because I'm going to have to talk about it more when it comes to ordering. So, I know the Penguin's going to be in my top 10. James A. Caster's comedy special, Heckler's Welcome. I don't think, at this juncture, I don't know if it's going to make top 10, but I'm going to put it in my honorable mention because I liked it. It was fun. It's a comedy special. Look into James A. Caster. He does a lot of my favorite comedy specials, or he does a lot of, like, there's not really any of his specials that I don't like. And this was the one that he put out towards the end of this year, and it was fun. He pretty much just did a comedy stand-up set where anybody in the audience could heckle at any time, and he's not allowed to complain or stop you or do anything about it. And the special is kind of just like a best case, the mix together of a couple of shows to make it that concept shine through, without, taking away from like the overall entertainment. So I think that's going to end up an honorable mention. Secret Level was the anthology series of official video game shorts that are all around. I think the shortest one is probably like 7 or 8 minutes, all the way up to like 15 or 20. I can't remember how many there were. I think there were 16 shorts total, maybe somewhere between 12 and 16 shorts, all based on actual ass big video games in some cases. So like there was one based on Spelunky, there was one based on D&D, there was one based on Mega Man, which was probably the shortest. Overall, the majority of them were fine. Some of them were good. I don't know if any of them were great, is where I ended up on them. There was a couple that were pretty great. I can't remember, like, if I was looking at a list of all of the episodes, I could kind of lean towards how I feel about it, but off the top of my head, good to great is generally where I would put it. I don't think there was any that I particularly just, like, didn't like or was bored by, but that's because, so, I consider that fine, at worst, probably. So I don't think it's going to make the top 10. We'll find out together. If I get to the end of this and there's not enough in the top 10, that means I have to start moving up some honorable mentions. So that's what this process is all about. Because that's how I end up surprising myself when I'm like, oh, I thought I watched more this year. Or I didn't watch as much as I thought I did. And I liked this more than I thought I did. That kind of thing. Like, this process all helps me root through that. And that's the reason why I even do it. Craven I didn't watch, and it's horrible from what I hear. But it's a comic book movie, and I watch a lot of comic book movies, so it might have been something that people might think that I might have watched anyway. I did not watch Craven. I watched Transformers 1, and I liked it. I think it was a lot of fun. I don't know if I loved it. It was fine. Or it was good. We'll see if it moves up, but that's where that at least goes. Transformers 1 is an honorable mention. As somebody who doesn't watch the majority of the Transformers movies, but I know what happens in them, like I watch a lot of videos about the Transformers movie, but I never just sit down to watch almost any of them. I think I watched the first one back when that came out, like the first Michael Bay one. And the second one. I think I watched the first two Michael Bay Transformers movies, and then I haven't sat down to watch one beginning to end since then. So this is the first Transformers movie I've watched in a long time. But I like this one a lot. It's all CG. I like the way it looked. I like all the characters. They're pretty funny. A really good version of the origins of the Transformers. So I liked it. Joker 2, didn't watch. Heard it was bad. Didn't watch Joker 1. So, but, you know, that one was at least mixed reviews, but it seems like Joker 2, across the board, found a way to make everybody upset. So, I didn't watch it, but I know everything that happens in it. I know all the spoilers. Same thing with most of these. Most of the movies that are so bad that I didn't see them, I would watch content on them that just spoils it and lets me know why it's so bad. I guess Madam Web came out this year, and I didn't add that on the list, but guess what? I did not watch it. So, but it's also real bad. Same thing for Venom. Did not watch Venom. Sounds like it was just below par. Like, it wasn't horrible, but it also wasn't good. So didn't watch that. I think this is the fourth Kingdom movie. Or the third. Actually, I think this is the third. So Kingdom is one of my favorite, yeah, I guess I can say that. One of my favorite manga series is Kingdom. And this is the live action movie series, which has actually been pretty decent for anime live action. And this is the third one, I believe, which means it's doing pretty well. If you're getting that many sequels in, I should double check because I can't tell from this little poster. Like, all these are a little bit smaller than I want them to be, but it was either that or else have like one of these be like, I can't read this at all. But I'm pretty sure it's Kingdom 3. Give me a second. Might as well. Nobody is rushing me here. Yeah, it's 3. And even though that's the case, It actually came out in 2023, but I think it didn't come out on Netflix, English Netflix, until this year. Same thing with, so Kingdom 4 is actually already done too, and that one is not out in the English yet, I don't believe. So, you know, technically 3 came out this year, at least as far as like what I can watch, so that's what all that counts. And or, you know, the general rule about my list is anything that I finished in 2024 and feel strong enough about to mention on a top list can be on that list, even if it wasn't actually created in 2024. But this one is not even that big of a technicality. I think it's going to end up on my top 10 looking at how things are going. Because looking at the rest of the things I have down here, I'm not confident that I have 10 other things to make the list. Or I have that many other things to make, you know, to push up to the top. Moving on, 3 Body Problem on Netflix, I watched like 2/3 of. It was very meh. I didn't finish it. The initial concept was kind of appealing. It was kind of a mystery. They don't tell you too much about the initial concept. By the way, this entire stream is spoilers heavy, spoilers free, unless somebody in the chat asks me otherwise to not spoil something. So, and I'll remind that every once in a while. If you don't want something spoiled about a show or a game or anything, say so in the chat before I get to it, and I will not spoil it as best I can unless I just really feel it's necessary to put my point across. And then I will warn you so you can mute the stream or whatever. 3 Body Problem is about another alien civilization coming to Earth because their original planet was fucked. And they send aliens to our planet early to kind of get the planet ready to be taken over, if I remember correctly, essentially. Like, the initial thing is, like, all the physicists and astrophysicists and anybody who, like, pays any attention to science starts committing suicide for whatever reason. If they don't help the aliens do what the aliens are trying to do, I think is what it ends up being. And then it just gets real dumb. Like, the writing just gets kind of... At least in the show. I know it's based on a book. So the book may not have these issues. But the show, I feel like, makes some decisions that are pretty dumb. In terms of, like, characters getting out of situations in ways that don't really make as much sense. And you just kind of, like, cut to them not getting away without explaining how it happened. And it seemed like a real bad like a situation that they'd have to get either real lucky or, you know, you're just writing them out of the situation because you want them out of the situation. Don't love that. Anyway, stuff like that. The writing just gets real hinky. So, it's fine to meh. Maybe even less than that. But I got far enough to consider it watched. So, Squid Game 2 I finished yesterday. Squid Game 2 is off the... hot off the presses. So, I was impressed by the second season. I thought it was going to be real hard for them to do a second season. And I think that they got there. I think it might make the top 10. Let's put it up there for right now, and then we'll come back to it. Dune 1, I watched this year, I believe, in preparation to watch Dune 2. I really don't care about Dune. I really expected to be wowed a lot more from how much people who read Dune really love Dune, either the books or the movies at this point. But if I'm honest with myself, I don't care. Like, I don't think there was anything wrong with Dune. I see why people like it. But when I watched it, I didn't feel strongly either way. Like, I wasn't bored. Like, I liked while I was watching Dune 1, I liked it. and I came away from it feeling like, okay, yeah, I would want to see a sequel to this. And then Dune 2 happened, and I just didn't care enough to go out of my way to watch Dune 2, which tells me I must not really be all that into it. I don't know why, specifically speaking on stream, I start getting sinusy. If I'm talking to people in real life, not a problem. It's only when I'm on stream, because I can already feel it happen. Maybe it's because I'm talking so much and like without stopping for very long. Anyway, I think Dune's gonna hit fine to meh. And that's not really a quality thing. That's just like a me personally don't feel that strongly about it. So this one's special. This one's different. This one is a specific to a single streaming network show called Hide and Seek that I just discovered or just got into in the last month. I think I only started watching it in December. The actual show is called Jet Lag, and this particular series, although I think they've only done Hide and Seek so far, it's called Hide and Seek because it is about a group of 3 normally YouTubers or YouTube producers who go out into the world and they play hide and seek across entire countries. So one of the 3 people or one of the 3 hosts will have 3 hours and 30 minutes to just hide somewhere in the country that season. Whatever they always do a season in whatever country they're in. So you have like the one that I watched was you have 3.5 hours to go hide somewhere in all of Japan, or at least however far you can get in 3.5 hours from the center of Japan, essentially. And it's kind of like the rules from there are set around, or get into like a little bit more nitty gritty, but they do a good job of not explaining how all the rules work until they are relevant. But pretty much that person goes hide, and then the other 2 people work together to go find that person. Whoever manages to stay hidden for the longest wins that season. And it's been fun. I'm 5 episodes in on this season. I think it's only going to be... I don't know how long the seasons are for, actually. But I know that they have 2 more people left who need to do... Everybody gets to hide twice each season, as long as they have enough time. And I know 2 more people need to hide, so there might be 2 more episodes left. But I like it. It's only on a service called Nebula, though, which is a streaming services by YouTubers for YouTubers, essentially. Like it's pretty much like, hey, you subscribe to this with money, and you still get all of our regular YouTube content, but you also get some premium content that's Nebula only, and a little bit higher production value because your streaming money is going towards it. And this is an example of one of the shows that resulted from that. And I like it enough to mention it on this list. I don't know if it's gonna... I've only barely started watching it, or I haven't watched that much of it, but the little bit that I've seen, I am way into. So it may actually make my top 10. For now, it's gonna go there. Let me... Hold on. There we go. I need to do that because my TV was dimming because I'm only looking at the same thing for too long. So my TV automatically was trying to dim things down. I need to fix my mouse, but too late now. Next... We're doing Agatha All Along, one of the few Marvel projects, one of 2 Marvel projects. Well, not one of 2. One of 3 Marvel projects, at least on this list. And I really liked Agatha All Along, but I don't know if it's going to make the top 10. It might. I didn't love it, but I liked it. I enjoyed it, but part of that was... I think... a good chunk of my enjoyment centered around the usual mystery of who's this character, why is this character there, as far as like comic book lore. Like, oh, is this character who we think they are? How do they fit into this version of the story? Etc., etc. If I didn't care about any of that, I don't think I would have liked Agatha All Along as nearly as much. But that being said, the combination of the 2 things, I like it quite a bit. But that's why I think that it's not going to make my top 10 because of that. Reminder, none of this is in order. This is all just vibes and general tiers, and I'm only going to order the top 10 at the end. Next up, we have the Fallout show. I guess the Fallout show is going to make my top 10. It was better than a lot of people... Well, it was better than I expected. I don't love it. I have problems with it, but looking at the way this thing is going, I think it's gonna break low top tens, and I'll talk about it more then. Has Been Hotel, the first season of Has Been Hotel, first proper season. I think it's gonna end up an honorable mention, but maybe not. I have a lot of stuff that I am gonna have to move up, so we'll see. But it Has Been Hotel, to go over it just in case I don't move it up, is I mean, I didn't really explain what Agatha All Along was. It is the sequel, the direct sequel to WandaVision, which is a Disney Plus show. And so Agatha All Along is a Disney Plus show focusing on the villain after, like, the villain gets her own show from WandaVision. Not a spoiler. Obviously, with the name of it, you should figure that out. And it tells the story of her going on the Witch's Road, which is a thing. And it was good. And Has Been Hotel is a Prime Video streaming show from Vivzipop, and who is a YouTube animator, is what I'm gonna say, because her main shows end up on YouTube, or her pilots ended up on YouTube, and her pilots were so popular they got picked up years ago. So Has Been Hotel is the show that got picked up by Amazon and is getting another season. Did well enough, and I really enjoyed the first season. Hell of a Boss is the one that stayed on YouTube. It didn't get picked up otherwise, but is arguably probably the better show overall, because it's made it a lot longer on YouTube and is way more has way more views overall. So I don't know where the two stand, but either way, Has Been Hotel is about pretty much the daughter of Satan, the princess of hell, wants to make a hotel where sinners in hell can come to pretty much change their ways and earn their way into heaven through kind of like group therapy and some other things. Well, I say group therapy, but really it's like a funny comedy show about that concept of really horrible people kind of trying to, for different reasons, come to this place and earn their way into heaven, even if they don't really care about it. They maybe have alternative motives for doing it or whatever, but either way, it's a fun show. It's kind of like, what if the elevator pitch is, what if a Disney princess was the princess of hell, because it's a musical, has a lot of musical acts, it looks very good, it's a lot of fun. It's gonna go in my honorable mentions, but I bet it'll move up into my top 10 in a little bit. I didn't watch Echo. Echo is another Disney Plus Marvel show based on a spin-off, or it's spun off of Daredevil. I didn't watch it, not for any particular reason. I didn't dislike the idea or anything about it. I should just go back and watch it just to fill in that hole as one of the few Marvel Disney Plus projects that I haven't watched, not counting What If, which I think What If Season 2 came out last year, and What If Season 3 came out this December, and I didn't watch that either, so it's not on the list. But not counting those, which I have skipped but may go back and watch eventually. Echo, I don't have a really good, I should just go back and watch it eventually, but I don't think I'm going to care a lot about it. But maybe I'll like it more than I expect. But if I did, I would expect it to be a fine to meh show, but maybe it would be like an honorable mention at least if I did watch it. Arcane Season 2 is going in my top 10, but we'll see where it ends up. I, personally, for the first time, watched The Boys this year. All the way starting from episode 1 of The Boys, all the way caught up to the current episode, the last episode that's currently released. I watched all of that this year. So I'm counting The Boys all as one show that I watched this year, even though it's not technically done because the final season probably comes out next year. It makes my top 10, so we'll talk about it more there. I don't think I need to explain what The Boys is at this point because I'm so behind coming to the show. But I think I also have a different perspective on it as somebody who watched all of it all at once, close together, as opposed to everybody else who has been waiting with years in between seasons, who I know have like burnt out on the series / aren't as excited or hyped about it. I think I benefited from watching it all in one go. So we'll see how that turns out. And then X-Men 97 is going to be in my top 10. Way better than it had any right to be, or way better than the idea on paper sounded. It is just like, hey, what if we made a direct sequel series or sequel season of the old X-Men cartoon, but with modern animation and modern like budget. It looks so much better than anything in 1997 could have looked, without losing the feeling of that original show. It's a real special thing. As somebody who didn't really feel that attached to the original show, I think even when I was a kid, I didn't really like watching the X-Men show because it felt kind of slow to me when I was that young. So for me to say that this one is really good is saying something. And then we have Deadpool and Wolverine. Gonna be definitely in my top 10. Really enjoyed the Deadpool and Wolverine movie. Let's see where that leaves us, because I'm gonna have to move up some honorable mentions. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We need 2 more to move up. Which do I like best out of the honorable mentions? I think I liked James Acaster enough. I almost want to move Jet Lag up, but man, I need to watch more seasons outside of a country that I have like inherent interest in. Like, I'm watching the Japan, like the fact that they were doing Japan this season is the reason why I even started the show. And they're on like season like 12 or something, so, or like 9. I think it's like season 9. So if I went back, no wait, it is season 12. If I went back to try to see like, do I like this if they do like their Australia season as much? That would help give me a better sense of like, am I just biased because they're in Japan, or do I like this entire concept enough? So I'm not moving that up. I feel like just because I'm not sure about that just yet. Is it maybe Transformers? I don't feel that strongly about Transformers. This has been a rough year for... kind of a rough year for... these kind of shows. Oh, wait! You know a big one that this list is missing? God damn it. I knew there was something I forgot. Hold up, hold up, hold up. Here's what we gotta do. We gotta put a pause on shit. Hold on. Okay. No, I know what I can do. First, you guys take a break on seeing that. Let me make a quick addition. It's only going to take me a second. The big one that I missed. Hopefully I didn't forget anything else, but I think this is the only thing. And I can add it on the fly. I'm just hiding the screen so I don't accidentally show shit that I'm not supposed to from my computer. I've done that once before. I did that last year. And it was annoying to, or it was slightly annoying to go back and fix. There we go. Technically, I'm going to have to go back and add this proper, but I'm doing the quick and dirty version of it. Okay. All done. Alright. So, the thing I forgot was Shogun. Really huge thing that I forgot. Shogun, I forgot that it came out this year. And that's going to go straight into my top 10. So that might be it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I knew there was something I was missing. I think that's it. I think that feels good. Yeah. Alright. So now we need to order the top 10. I'm gonna start at the what I know or what I feel like is gonna be at the end, and then make my way up towards number 1. So considering the stuff that I had to just move up and didn't know was a lock for top 10, I think James Acaster might be number 10. I'm gonna do Vibes. Fallout might be number 10. Squid Game is towards the back half. Did I like Squid Game more than Fallout? Yeah, I had some real problems with Fallout. Specifically, everything having to do with the black guy who's in the Brotherhood of Steel. I didn't like almost anything that happened in the first half of the season with that character. Back half of the season, he was more tolerable to good. But the first half of Fallout, every time he was on screen or the story was telling his part, I didn't like anything that was happening for the most part, which is a pretty big ding in that show overall. And it's the only show in my top 10 that are making the top 10 that still has a ding like that, to that degree, for the most part. James Acaster's comedy special is only so low because it's only a comedy special. It was only an hour long. So just in terms of like amount of content you get, it's like an hour and a half or something like that. Which I guess that, movies are that long or a little bit longer. But still, that in consideration versus a bunch of these other shows that are like hours and hours of content, I think that's important to take into account. So it's going to be on the lower end, and not my favorite special of his, but it's up there. It's probably like my second or third favorite special from him. So that'll make the cut. What else are we moving towards the back? Maybe The Boys. I think I like The Boys more than Squid Game at this point. I think that's good. The main thing about season 2 of Squid Game, and this is kind of a spoiler, but it ends with a cliffhanger of sorts. Like, it's a shorter season. I think it's only 8 episodes, and it effectively finishes its story in those 8 episodes, but it ends in a cliffhanger with the final season is going to happen, I think, next year. So it's like a semi cliffhanger, which I think is fair to end a season on, but it also cuts in how much I think of the entire project, because it is something that needs that final season for me to know exactly how I feel about everything that has happened after season 1. Season 1 was its own finished thing. Like, if you never made any more Squid Game after season 1, I know exactly how I feel about that. Now they've had season 2 and are going to have a season 3. You've made it wishy-washy, so I'm gonna have to wait now. But even that said, Squid Game season 2 ends up right about here for how I feel about it. Behind The Boys, which I like The Boys a lot for the most part. I'm not crazy about it. Like, I feel like the world in general is crazy about it, or at least was. Like, I feel like everybody else was super hype about the concept back when it came out, being so hyper-violent and so dark and gritty. But the reason I skipped it in the first place is because, like, there was so much gritty superhero shit coming out at the time. And I was like, I am not impressed. I need more than that. So, me coming to it late and being able to watch all of it all together, I liked it. I think I like later seasons of The Boys more than people who were in it since the beginning, because I watched it all together. And it was over quicker. I didn't have to wait for it. So, either way, that's where it ends up for me. I think above that means I feel like this is going to come down between these two. I don't think Kingdom can go much higher than this. Quality-wise, like, it's good. But it's not. But it's still a live-action anime, and it has its issues. But I still like it personally about this much. I think the Kingdom live-action shows, for general audiences besides me, would be towards the 9 or 10 area. But from how much I like the show and how well they're doing on representing it in live action, I think it ends up about here. And then I really like X-Men. So the next thing I have to figure out is if I like X-Men more than Deadpool and Wolverine. Very appropriate. They're right next to each other. Um. I think I like Deadpool and Wolverine more because I have X-Men. Like I said, I don't have that much of a connection with, and Deadpool and Wolverine did such a great job paying off. You know, it's all fan service, but I can like a thing that's about fan service, and the way how deep of a cut it did about the Fox merger and all those properties and all the X-Men coming to Marvel and all that fun shit. I think that movie was really fun. I don't know how I feel about it overall. One of these days, I'm gonna just do like a tier list of the entire Marvel MCU, especially that now that it feels like we might be approaching the overall what we can call the end of the MCU. I don't think that the MCU is ever gonna just completely stop at this point, but I think we're approaching the point where they're going to start trying to put out a bunch of projects again every year, and they're just not going to get the numbers they want. And so it's going to always, from here on out, be like a 1 to 2 movie and 1 to 2 TV series thing from here on out. It's not going to be like 3 to 4 movies a year and 3 TV shows thing like it used to be. I think they're going to have to slow down significantly, but it'll always be rumbling around in the background, in my opinion. But I'll be happy if I'm wrong. Either way, I think that's where it ends up on this list. Actually, I think the rest of this list is in order. I think this list is done. So just to finish it out for why, Arcane Season 2, a sequel to my favorite animated piece of media of all time. Arcane Season 1 is my favorite animated thing of all time. The second season is not as good as the first season, but is still very good. It was a show that didn't need a second season. I think they did a fine job following it up, but it did feel a little bit rushed in places, in spots. Like, there were storylines that didn't have enough time to flesh out the characters as well as they did in Season 1. Like, it needed, like, 3 more episodes. It needed, like, 2 or 3 more episodes, or it needed to cut some stuff. But even all that said, it's still, obviously, like you see in this list, better than most other stuff I watched this season, or this year. But that's just the reason why I didn't make it higher than the other ones on my list. It had some issues, whereas I see like the first season being nearly perfect. I don't have almost any issues with Season 1. And then we have Shogun, which, let me tell you, I don't watch anything on Hulu at all. There are so many shows that I have heard amazing, that are like, oh my god, you've got to watch this amazing shit about. Like, off to the side every single year. Shogun, including stuff like Shogun that is like Asian or like about Japan or whatever, like stuff that's in my wheelhouse that I just ignore. But this year, for whatever reason, before it even came out, Shogun, I saw like an advertisement for, and I was like, I'll try that. And it turned out being one of the best, like, it's won a bunch of Emmys, I think, or Grammys, no, Emmys for TV shows. Everybody fucking loves Shogun as one of the best shows of the year. I just so happened on one of my random picks to just be all like, let me try that one. Picked out what is possibly what is widely considered one of the best shows of the year. I'm very happy that I have such an eye for these things. So when I say, and I after watching it early in the first half of the year, I was like, this is going to be my show of the year, unless Arcane beats it. So for Dark Horse, the Penguin, to come out of nowhere and knock it off its high horse, knock Shogun off his high horse, and just blow me out of the fucking water with how good a Batman spinoff can be about the Penguin, who is traditionally not a super interesting villain. Like, this version of the Penguin is like this is to the Penguin what Heath Ledger was to the Joker. Like, I'm willing to say that. That doesn't necessarily mean that he's like on the same level as Heath Ledger's Joker. I don't want to get into that discussion, but I'm gonna say that this is the penultimate version of the Penguin in any piece of media. I think that I can feel strongly saying that. And I think this show is my favorite thing that I watched this year. And that feeling only got stronger as the time went by. There's just so many layers, and I don't know if it's a better overall, higher quality show than Shogun. I think Shogun won all of its awards for a reason. It doesn't help that Shogun came out so much earlier in the year, so I'm so much further removed from my feelings about Shogun. And I also was practically watching it. I didn't get to talk about Shogun as much as I got to talk about the Penguin with people. So it makes the feelings a lot harder to crystallize. But all of that said, I still think that this ends up true, because there's just so much more I could understand of the Penguin's nuances than of the Shogun's nuances that I know are there, that I just can't fully understand without being completely up on my history of the time period that Shogun takes place in. So there may be subtle things that I'm missing more, even though I'm pretty sure that show does a good job of getting most of it across, even if you don't understand Japanese or know anything about Japanese history. I still think that just means that the Penguin gets away with having less to make sure that the viewer understands, and therefore you can get its complexity more easily. And with that, I think that finishes my shows and TV. Shows and movies list. I think I feel good about this version of the list. So going from the bottom up, we have Fallout at number 10, James A. Caster's Heckler's Welcome at number 9, Squid Game Season 2 at number 8, The Boys, the entire series of The Boys, at number 7, Kingdom 3, the live-action Netflix show, at number 6. Yeah. X-Men 97 at number 5, Deadpool and Wolverine at number 4, Arcane Season 2 at number 3, Shogun at number 2, and The Penguin at number 1. Those are my top 10 shows and movies of 2024. Worth mentioning that only one movie made it onto the list this year. I really racked my brain about other movies that I sat down in a theater to watch. I feel like there's other movies that I just forgot. But if I don't remember them, then they must not have made that big of an impression on me. I really did my digging. I looked at lists of top 2024 movies in general, just to remind myself what came out this year, and I still managed to miss some stuff. But I think that's fine. Let me do a quick save of this. So I'm going to take you guys down for a second. We don't want any mistakes. Here we go. Damn it. No, we don't. I'm going to save this tier list to my computer, so I just don't want to have to worry about you guys seeing what you're not supposed to. And download and save. Alright, so that's done. We're done with that. Making good time. That only took an hour. But these next two always take longer. We're going to do my anime list next. And that's going to take I'm just going to keep things down while I set this up. Just a little bit. Not going to take too long. I think this makes more sense to do half and half this way. So let me set up the screen here. God damn it. I think this works. Visually. Can I hide anything else here? Yeah. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Give me a little bit more visuals back. Alright. Let me get you guys back into the visuals as we go into top 10 anime. Alright, cool. Alright. So, I have sorted my entire list of all my anime of all time up here at the top of the screen. It has been sorted into my finished time on the anime, when I finished it. So, Blue Lock Season 2 is the anime I finished last, and as you go down, these are earlier in the year, in order of when I finished watching them. But that should mean that all of these are anime that finished airing in 2024. I didn't do anything old this year. I didn't have enough time. Well, this was a pretty light year for me watching anime, to be honest. At least it feels like it. There were a couple of anime I watched every season, but I didn't watch as many anime that I didn't feel super strongly about as I usually do. I only really kept up with the stuff that I was pretty set on watching. So these are not in order by score, which I noticed. I don't know why. Oh, this one isn't scored. Hold on, I gotta score. Demon Slayer's latest arc. I think it was fine, right? It was solid. It's another solid Demon Slayer season. Alright, so now everything has a score on it, which will help me in deciding the final order. So, obviously there's more than 10 here. I'm not going to talk about all of these necessarily. Oh, I should mention that The Boy and the Heron is an exception. The Boy and the Heron came out last year, but I only got around to watching it this past December. And I liked it, but it definitely wouldn't make my top 10. I didn't love it. It's fine. It's good. It's a good Studio Ghibli movie, but I never feel that strongly about Studio Ghibli, personally. But they are good. Alright, I fixed it. So, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pulling anime from up here. I'm going to be pulling the ones, first I'm going to go through and just pull all the 9s. Do I even have any 9s this year? I only have one. So we're going to be pulling the ones with higher scores. And I'm going to be typing them, I'm going to be pulling them in from this list down here, and then this is the actual list that I will be reordering as we go. So we're going to just do vibes. Pretty much what I feel like is going to make my top 10, and then I'll cut as needed. This is just a better visual way of putting it out, doing it for you guys, so you guys can see big pretty pictures instead of just text. Okay. Let's start with one that I already know is making it, and it's probably going to be the top one, not to spoil. Free Ren. I saw it in the list. There it is. Is that the button? There we go. Free Ren is going to make the top 10. I think it'll be best if I just go from here, because I know this is the very first thing I watched in 2024. So I'll work my way up from here. This is the first Slam Dunk. This is a movie, a CG movie based on Slam Dunk, a very popular basketball manga, and I guess anime, but I think it's more popular as a manga. But either way, it's a very early sports series and is widely beloved. But I have never watched or read any Slam Dunk. But then this movie came out, technically at the end of last year, but I didn't watch it until this year. And it was so late in the year. I don't even know if it was available last December. I don't think it was. It didn't hit Netflix until this year, so it counts. And I really liked it. It might be in my top 10. Let's throw that on to the list. The first Slam Dunk. I'm kind of scared to go to the second page, because the last time I went to the second page in this list on this website, it broke. So I'll come back to it. I don't want to break it and have to start over. But I think we're gonna consider it in the top 10 for right now. We have two movies that I watched in the same sitting. The Rascal series, or Rascal Does Not Dream series, is an anime series I really enjoy. And it had two movies that only got translated or brought over to the States earlier this year, even though they both came out last year. One in the summer, one in the winter. They put them out as a double feature, so I watched both of them one after the other. I like them both pretty solid. I don't know if they're going to make the top 10. Let me look. I don't feel like they're going to make the top 10. Mostly because they're movies. and they aren't movies that I feel like blew my socks off, even though I like them pretty solidly. They're just mostly here for like comfort food, but we'll see. If my list ends up short, then I might throw one of them on, but I don't feel like they're gonna make it for right now. The Apothecary Diaries is going on the list, very high. Oh, it's a the, so it's not gonna be. It's gonna be in the second half. All right, so we're not gonna throw it on there yet, but it's definitely gonna be on the list. I'll talk about it more once we actually are down to the list. The Spy Family movie came out this year. Well, actually, I guess it came out in Japan end of last year, but I think it came out in the West this year. So again, it counts. But it's just a spy. It's just a movie, technically non-canon. Actually, I think it is canon. Follow up to season 2 of Spy Family. Spy Family's always super fun. Spy Family's always super funny. The movie was all of those things. Nothing beyond, super above and beyond the original TV show. So it's solid. I think it's gonna make the list. Man, everything that's gonna make my list is in the second fucking page. There's definitely some stuff from just straight up last year on here, by the way, so ignore those. Like, I saw Heavenly Delusion, which was an entirely last year anime, but from how I had to do these filters, it was the only way for me to make sure that I got all the anime that might be relevant to this discussion. Anyway, I don't think Spy Family is going to make the top 10, but we will see. The Haikyuu had a movie that came out as well. The fact that I don't remember a whole lot about the movie means it was probably fine. I mean, I gave it an 8. I liked it a lot, but when you start getting into individual parts of Haikyuu, which is like the biggest volleyball sports anime, which is very good. I do love Haikyuu. But we're getting to the point where they're so slow at putting things out, it's hard for me to keep track of how I feel about the individual parts and what happened in the individual parts. So I don't feel strongly about it. And I think we have enough to hold. Our list of 10 is actually all the way up, already up to 3. It doesn't feel like it, so we're making progress. I just haven't added them to the list down here. I don't think it's going to make the list, but we'll find out together. Next we have Baki Hanma versus Kengan Ashura. So, I'm a big fan of Kengan Ashura, which is on this list. The end of Kengan Ashura, Season 2, Part 2 is on this list. But this was an awesome crossover idea. It was a good idea to have characters from Baki the Grappler, which is an old school fighting, underground fighting of like a bunch, like, what if MMA, but no rules, kill the other person levels of shit. I really feel pretty good about early Baki the Grappler, but then latest Baki the Grappler, it goes too far and I'm not into it. But they had the idea of doing, what if we do Baki versus Kengan Ashura, which is the modern day version of that idea. It's pretty much the exact same show, or exact same type of show, about an underground fighting league. So it makes sense to have the two shows fight each other. Sadly, it's one of those situations where it didn't have it wasn't animated well enough, and it was kneecapped by the fact that, you know, whenever you have these crossovers in Japan, they have to make sure that nobody really loses, and it kind of defeats the whole purpose. Like, the main two characters fight at the end in the finals, as you would expect. Baki Hanma and Ryoma, I think, is the main character's name from Kengan Ashura. The two of them fight, and then it ends with like a stalemate, and that's boring. And a lot of the other characters from those shows fight, and they don't necessarily. Those fights are definitively wins and losses, I think. But it felt underwhelming overall. But it was a really good idea. Not gonna make my top 10. Happy it exists. But it's 6 out of 10 for a reason. Not great. Bartender Glass of God. I think that's gonna make the top 10, you guys. I don't love Bartender, but I liked it a lot. I think being around the bar industry for as much as I have been in my life at this point really played a part in that. I don't know if I would have liked it nearly as much if I wasn't into the bar industry. Hard for me to say. That's a different version of me that I can't predict. But I think it's going to make it. We're going to throw it in the top 10. If we have to take it off, then we'll see. But it's definitely going to be in the lower half if it makes the list. Another season of Konosuba. Konosuba's 3rd season. Guess what? No hesitation. It's going on the list. Konosuba never misses. Always hilarious. Always great. You don't really even need to go into more detail on that. Konosuba's going to make the list. Where it ends up, though, let's find out together. I've got no 9s this year. It's all been... Well, I have 1 9. Everything else has been 8s. It's not a great year for anime, you guys. Ish. Kaiju number 8 is probably going to make the list. Animated super well. Really fun concept. I do wish they had done more episodes of it. It's starting to get to the point where the 12-episode structure of shonen is really, not really, but sort of handicapping how good they can be. Because now the wait for season 2 is, well, that's not always true. Because Dan is 12 episodes, but its next season is following up pretty quick. It's coming in the summer. So if you're gonna have your like 12 episode seasons that close together within a year, less than a year apart, then I'm less upset about it, or it's less annoying. But I feel like Kaiju number 8 isn't gonna come out. The next season of that isn't set to come out until maybe next winter. So like a full year from now or more. And that it just really takes the wind out of your sails in some cases. But we'll see. But either way, the first 12 episodes of Kaiju number 8 hold up. We'll see if it breaks the top 10 in the end. I'm pretty sure it will. But we'll see. Yeah, as I get seeing what's left on this list, I'm leaning more towards that being the case. But like I said, we'll find out. Demon Slayer, season whatever at this point. I think it's season... If I had to guess, 5. I think it's season 5. I know at some point they stopped going by seasons and they started going by arc. But I want to say, counting the first 2 that were called seasons, I think, and then they started going into arcs after that. I think this would technically be the 5th season of Demon Slayer. It was fine. It was good. I mean, it was an almost an entire arc that was training, which some people didn't like. They felt like nothing really happened. But I always like training arcs, and I feel like this one moved things along in an interesting enough way to make that fine, to make that okay. I think it's going to break the top 10, looking at how this list is going. So I'm going to throw it on. Demon Slayer, there it is. Swordsmith, no, the Hashira training arc, yeah. Swordsmith's village arc was last year. Man, it doesn't feel like that big of a gap since last year, or since the last arc to this one, time-wise. But I think the Hashira training arc is going to make the list. Next, we have an anime that definitely came out last year. Right? No? It came out this year? I really thought Windbreaker came out last year. I thought I was late to the party on Windbreaker. Apparently not. It came out earlier this year. It's a pretty straightforward fighting anime about like a high school, like delinquents in Japanese high schools, made up schools where pretty much the entire school is nothing but people who want to fight, going up against other schools in the area that also want to fight. Like that's pretty much all it is just fighting. But because the premise is so simple, the characters are pretty likable, and it's able to focus on the fighting in a way that makes things. I mean, it's fighting. It's about the fighting, but really it's about the emotions between the characters and their backstories for why they're fighting. So they don't slow things down by like telling you the backstories and then making you wait for the fight. They jump into the fight and then they tell you the backstories as the fights are happening. But I think it's structured in a way to make it more interesting than it would be otherwise. It's pretty solid, but I think these first 12 episodes of it, or first 13 episodes, it will be retroactively made better once the next season happens whenever that does. I know we're getting another season of it. And I think it'll be better once it's a big, longer set of episodes. So this first season I only gave a 7, but I think it's pretty solid. It's just a bit simple. Not gonna make the list. King and Ashura's Season 2, Part 2, as annoying as that is always to say now, finishes all of King and Ashura. Done and done. Main characters done. I gave it an 8. I like it a lot. I'm trying to think if there was really good fights this season. I think there were. I think there actually, yeah, there were some really good fights this season. I don't know if I would say the best in that series, but there were some good fights. Fights that I was looking forward to. That's the thing about fighting anime is you need to have matchups that you are excited to see who will win. Like, you don't know who's going to win, and you're excited to see who's going to win, and you're excited to see how it's going to happen. And I think King and Ashura does all of that very well for the type of anime it is. And the CG animation is used fantastically during the fights. Doesn't look great when anything else is happening. When people are just talking to each other or whatever, not fantastic. But the minute a fight is happening, the CG animation really shines, as always. I think it's going to make my top 10. Should be down here in the K's. King and Ashura 2, Part 2. It's going to make the list. We've currently got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I know there's 2 more, 7 and 8. Okay. We might have to actually cut one of these, because I know how, well, yeah. There's actually, we'll see. The Elusive Samurai is going on the list. Elusive Samurai is really fucking good. But it's also on the second page, so we'll wait to go to it. And I'll talk more about it once I add it to the list. Oshinoko's Season 2 is also on the second, always on the second page. And it's going to go on the list. Why wasn't Malevolent Speed, oh, did that come out last year? Why are these on the list at all then, if they came out last year? Well, I guess I know the answer to that. I think it was the tail end of last year that I watched those, right? Yeah, this is the second season. So that was last year. Okay, just making sure. I saw it in this list, and I was like, wasn't that this year? Oshinoko Season 2 is going to make the list. Oh, here it is. It's going to make the list. I'll talk more about it since we already know that, and I don't have to really think about that too much. Monogatari series is going to make the list. But I will say, although it and Frieren are the only 2 anime with 9s. So maybe that automatically says where it's going. It's probably going to be going by the Japanese name, which might be on the second page. That's fine, but Monogatari series is gonna make the list. My Hero Academia Season 7, with the way this is going, I don't think it's gonna make the list. Mostly because I think the latest season was pretty okay. Had some actually really fun fights towards the end. We're getting to the end game. There's only gonna be one more season after this, and then it's gonna be all over, I believe. Or it's gonna be a movie. But they really took some turns with They took some disappointing turns with the story. They do a time skip of sorts, but they don't really do a big enough one to make it as interesting as it could be, and that bothers me a lot about the series. It really handicaps how much I can care about the characters. Yet I still really care about these. You know, I've been with them for so long. These characters are all very good. But it's a series that is not ending as strong as it started. Overall, is a general feeling I have towards it. But it's still not bad. Like, it's still quality anime, or quality shonen. But I don't think it's going to make the list with the way things are going right now. So I'm going to leave it off. I already talked about The Boy and the Heron. Not super strong for me as a Ghibli movie, so it's not going to be making the list. And Dan Dan is definitely making the list. Super fun. Super great. We'll talk about it more when we got to order things. And Blue Lock Season 2, sadly, not going to make the list. Blue Lock Season 2 is the meme of 2024 on how the dip in quality from Season 1 of Blue Lock to Season 2 is crazy. they just, it's a flip show, or like a flip note animated show. Like, so barely any movement to the animation compared to season 1. Even though season 1 was really popular. It's so crazy. It's comparable to the drop in quality from One Punch Man season 1 and One Punch Man season 2. Although Blue Lock season 1 was not that above and beyond pretty, but it was just so much better than season 2. Season 2 still, I managed to give a 7 just because Blue Lock is still fun. It's still a good idea. The season was fun. The characters are still good. The matches that happen are still interesting to watch. Or I guess the match. I think it was just one match this entire season. It was carried entirely on the characters and the story and that. But the visuals, man, such trash. Absolute trash. You know what's not on this list? Because I didn't finish it. Is Uzumaki. The Uzumaki anime came out this year. Just going to mention it here. It is also trash. That's why I didn't watch it. I think I watched the first episode and then stopped after hearing about how bad the animation got after that. It was only 4 episodes, and the backstory of, like, the show having a whole bunch of problems with production and being made, and that resulting in a show that ended up pretty bad in the end, is well known at this point. So that's definitely not going to make the list, but I just should mention it because I just now remembered that it's not being shown here, but I am aware of Uzumaki. I did not finish Uzumaki, and it's obviously not going to make the list. Had the potential, but it did not. It came out bad. So, with that all said, let me add the last few to the list that I know are going to make it, and then, so I don't have to worry about it breaking anymore. That being the Apothecary Diaries, the Elusive Samurai, and we have more than 10 already. I don't think that the Spy Family movie is going to make it, so I'm not going to add that. Wait. Where's Monogatari? That should be on this list, god damn it. Okay, hold on. I'm going to have to just search for it manually. I don't want to mess around with the filters too much and lose all this like I did when I was practicing on my own. Let me clear the filters. Cool. Monogatari. Right? Yeah. Monogatari. I don't... can I just say off? What about off? I don't think there's a bunch of anime that have off in the name, but there is... Oh, no, here it is. Yeah, why didn't this should have been in my filter. I watched this. Did I not mark it as finished watching, maybe? Whatever. Oh, they counted this as separate? Why? I mean, it's different, but it's still part of the season. Whatever. I guess I'll just count them together. It should really be all one thing, but that's... yeah. And I can't really explain why. If you don't know what about the Monogatari series at this point, then I'll explain it to you at a different time. But I don't want to go into explaining the... Monogatari is so big. But it's one of my favorite series. It's up there with JoJo's. It's up there with Gurren Lagann in terms of like the upper echelons of anime that I love. So I'm not going to go into explanation. We just got a out of nowhere new season of it after what feels like 4 or 5 years of after the final season of the anime. We just get more of it. Turns out it wasn't they didn't call it the final season, but it felt like the main story was already wrapped up, and now we're just getting extra innings last season. And now they're just keeping going, and I'm not complaining. And it was another really good fucking season, 9 out of 10. But these two are counted together. So with that, we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We technically are 1 over. We're going to have to cut something. And the thing we're going to cut, bartender? We're gonna cut bartender? Top 10 of the year? Did I like Bartender more than Demon Slayer? I don't think so. Did I like Bartender more than... I think Demon Slayer is really the bottom of the list. Looking at these. Yeah. Yep, Bartender's gone. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9... Uh-oh. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, yeah. We did it. So now we're down to our top 10. Now we just got to order them. Considering that I almost cut it, Demon Slayer's at the bottom. Work with me. There we go. I can visually show it up here. Demon Slayer. It's going to be our number 10. I'm strong on that. Above Demon Slayer, Kengan Ashura, I feel like goes just above it. And then above that, Kaiju number 8. Those two I'm unsure about. Those could swap back and forth, but those are definitely where they're gonna end up. Now I'm starting to cut everything you see on screen down here. Fantastic anime. These down here, great anime. Solid to great anime. Everything here, fantastic anime. This has gotten hard. I'm gonna have to start making some real hard cuts. Or not cuts, they're just like movements. Okay, let's do it this way. Let's do what I know is moving up. Roughly. This isn't gonna be exactly where I'm doing a vibe move. I'm moving stuff where I generally know the area of the list is gonna end up in. Shit, man. Okay, no, I think I have this. How much do I really like Dandadan, you guys? How much do I really like Dandadan? I really like Dandadan. 12 episodes, really good animation. I just really feel like it needs a second season of stuff. 12 episodes for Dandadan is not enough. Some of these other shows, The Elusive Samurai gets away with 12 episodes just fine. I don't feel like I have that problem with it. Dandadan needs... It even ends on like halfway through an arc. And I need to know where that overall show is going. It spends those 12 episodes barely getting its main crew together, judging from this photo. To my understanding, this is the crew. This is like the main characters we're going to be with for the rest of the show. Is my understanding. We barely get the last guy in the last 2 episodes. And we're not even, he doesn't even have his powers yet. We don't know exactly what is going to happen in his arc because we had to cut it off halfway through. I think that works against Dandadan. Everything else is so fucking good about Dandadan. But I think I'm at the point where I have to start making cuts really hard. And that helps me decide to move it down one more spot. Oshinoko Season 2. Oshinoko is so good. I really love Oshinoko at this point. Or not love. It's just south of love. I think Oshinoko is so fucking good. But it's so weird. I think it's so good for weird reasons. Oshinoko is like an anime that I like a whole lot, but I couldn't necessarily enthusiastically recommend as strongly as some of these other anime. Like, Dandadan, I could recommend to pretty much anybody who watches anime without hesitation. Oshinoko, even though I think it's probably overall more interesting and better to me, I would have to hesitate in suggesting it to people because what it's about is so much more niche. But it's animated super beautifully, and the story that's going on in it is very interesting, if not problematic at times. And when I say problematic, I mean that in just like the writing sense, not necessarily the like canceled sense. But this season was really good. I really liked Oshinoko this season, you guys. And it's a complete package. I think it was, how many episodes? 13 episodes. Solid. I'm looking forward to more of it. But if I don't get any, if it stopped where it was, would be fine. So I like that more than Dandadan. Dandadan ended up lower on this list than maybe expected, I bet. People are going crazy for Dandadan, but I think it's the only reason is it needs more episodes. If it had come out with a 24 episode first season, I bet it could have scratched pretty high in my top 3 of the year or whatever. But it did what it did. So, because of episode count, Dandadan's going to be our number 7. 10, 9, 8, 7. Oshinoko goes above that. I have to decide where Konosuba goes on this list. This was not the best season of Konosuba. That doesn't necessarily mean it was bad. But I think Season 3 of Konosuba, better than Season 2, worse than Season 1. Maybe? This is me thinking. This is my... Hey, the music stopped. I just now realized the music stopped. Hold on. It's probably because I ran out of... Shit. This is the wrong tab. Why'd the music stop? Probably ran out of songs, so it's gonna... Let me throw on... Not trance. Ambient? There we go. I wonder how long it's been off for. Not that it's the end of the world, but... Feels less lonely. Let me know if that's too loud. It's hard for me to tell. But this seems like a pretty quiet track. Oh wait, it sounds like it might get louder. Yeah. Alright, there we go. Let me know if that's too loud. As we were. F11. F11. F12. F11. There we go. Okay, as we were. Konosuba Season 3, 11 episodes. Always love Konosuba. That's why it's so high in the list by default. Is it better than Oshinoko's second season? I don't think it was. Overall, I think this is where Konosuba ends up. Better than Dandadan, worse than Oshinoko. I'm trying to really think out if that's what I feel like. Is Konosuba better than Dandadan? Remembering the arcs that happened in Konosuba with like the princess and then everything that happened with darkness, I think Dandadan is going to edge it out. So I correct myself. Dandadan is number 6, not number 7. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Yeah. This feels better to me. This feels better to me. Yeah. And then the rest of this might be... No, it's not in order. This is where it gets hard. I'm going to spoil this. Friren's my anime of the year. I've been saying it to anybody who's listening. Full stop. Frieren is my favorite anime of the year. And guess what? It's fucking 28 episodes long. Wonder if that plays a big part in why I feel so strong about Frieren being my favorite fucking anime of the year. That technically started last year because it had so many episodes. So now we're really deciding what goes in the second, third, and fourth spots. I'm going to guess that Monogatari should go second. This season of Monogatari should go second, considering it's the only other thing I gave a 9. And yes, this specific season of Monogatari is not as good as Frieren. Freerun was something I had no idea I was going to like. I really don't like fantasy normally, or fantasy as a setting really works against you and making me interested. But Freerun managed to overcome that and be my favorite anime of the year handily, which is saying something. Monogatari is the follow-up to one of my favorite anime in general, so definitely second on the list. Now we need to figure out 3 and 4 between The Elusive Samurai and Apothecary Diaries. Which I need to talk about more. The Apothecary Diaries does one of my favorite fucking things that happens to me. If you do the nickel thing, if I had a nickel for every time I started watching a show with little to no information about it other than good recommendations, high recommendations, good reviews, critically acclaimed, that kind of thing. I go into it not knowing much more than just that, and it ends up being a show about a super smart strategist type main character just being super smart and making up schemes and figuring out plans. I'd have like 4 or 5 nickels at this point. It's crazy. It just keeps happening. Shogun was that. The main character that everybody loves. Well, not the main character, but one of the main characters of that show. Like, in theory, the third main character is a general who's just super smart and crafty and makes plans and shit. The Apothecary Diaries is about a main character girl who gets kidnapped by kidnappers, taken into during feudal China times, I'm pretty sure, feudal China, taken into a harem, and she becomes essentially a detective within the harem, solving different cases and events within the harem. She's pretty much like House MD, but in anime. Slightly different, different attitude in the way they carry themselves, but otherwise loves a good logic puzzle or likes figuring shit out. Really interesting character. The other thing I would compare it to is like the old USA detective shows. It would fit in right along one of those. It would fit in. It's a monk. It's a psych. Is that the only 2 examples from USA that I can think of? It's one of those shows. It definitely would fit in right next to a psych or a monk. I don't think there's any other detective shows from USA I can think of. It's very good. Super good. And then The Elusive Samurai takes place in feudal Japan. So both of these are feudal time periods. And is just about a main character based on a real historical figure, but our main character is just a little prince of a village that gets destroyed, and he needs to grow up to build an army that can avenge, like take back the village or take back the land that was taken from him as a kid. Him as a little kid has no power. He is super weak, but he can run away like nobody's business. You can't catch him if he doesn't want to be caught, and that is enough. The show finds ways of letting him use that to his advantage to reach his goals. Let me put it that way. Super well animated. One of the prettiest shows of the year. Kind of flew under the radar as a result because of its it's not a shonen, not really. It has very much the feelings of a shonen battle show. Like the formatting is that of like a shonen, but it's not really. It's weird. It's like an in-betweener. But nobody's really talking about it. I don't think it was in Shonen Jump, which is what plays a big part in it. But it was fan-fucking-tastic. So, out of those 2, Apothecary Diaries or The Elusive Samurai, I'm going to give it to The Elusive Samurai. The only real reason is the Apothecary Diaries looks good enough. Looks very good, I'll even say. But The Elusive Samurai is beautiful. The Elusive Samurai has amazing animation. Really high tier animation. Like, The Elusive Samurai, I was about to say probably has the best overall animation of the year. But then I think about Frieren. Frieren has some really good animation. At times. I might still be willing to say that the Elusive Samurai edges it out, though. I think that I'm still going to say that the Elusive Samurai is the best looking anime of this year, but Frieren is still better overall for way more reasons. So I think this is the list. I think we're done. So let's look at let's save it, publish it, look at the final list here, and then we'll move on to games. We're making good time. Less than an hour for the anime. Let's put this in a pretty... Uh-oh. What's this? Switch to table view. I want to go to fucking table view. This site is fucking breaking, man. Table. Table. Oh, no, actually, I don't want table view. There's another view on this that I've used in previous years. Why can't I... Visible on your profile and everywhere else your folders. Well, yeah. Okay. Is it or is it not? Man, the site's being weird today. Let me leave the list and come back to it and see if it'll act right. Nope. Maybe it's this browser. But anyway. This is the list. You know what? That's a better picture for the Apothecary Diaries. Ah, no it isn't. So, going through the list. Ignore that there's 11 because these two are together. Without me getting into the details of why they're separate, I get why this happened, but it's one anime. At number 10, we have Demon Slayer, the latest season, the Hashira training arc. At number 9, we have Kengan Ashura 2, Part 2. At number 8, we have Kaiju number 8. How appropriate. I didn't even think about that. That's fantastic. My 8th favorite anime of the year was Kaiju number 8. It knew it when it was created, where it was going to end up. Konosuba Season 3 are number 7. Number 6 goes to Dandadan. Number 5 goes to Oshinoko's second season. Number 4 goes to the Apothecary Diaries. Number 3 goes to the Elusive Samurai. Number 2 goes to Monogatari series Off and Monster Season. And then the top number 1 anime of 2024 goes to Frieren, Beyond Journey's End. Fantastic year. Well, not fantastic. I would say the fact that these two made it onto the list, as much as I like them, not necessarily. I feel bad saying that about Demon Slayer, but this was... I've had previous years where the entire list felt like this section. The rest of these kind of start dwindling off in a way that other years was pretty sad. I might be being a little bit more mean to this bottom half than it deserves. These were really solid anime, but I just don't feel nearly as strongly about it as I do these. These really amazed me. So I think this year was solid, but not great. Technically. Plus I don't really feel like I watched that much anime this year as a result. So, this is the list. Let's wrap it up. I'm going to take I'm just going to grab a soda before we go into the game list. Because now we've been going for almost 2 hours. And the game list will probably take at least an hour and a half at this rate. Because I have like 35 games to go through. We'll see. So let me close this. Uh-oh, that's not it. How did that happen? Why did F12 do that? Uh-oh. Oh, where'd it go? How did that happen? Okay, hold on. What did I just open? Private? No, I don't need it to be private. That's annoying. I don't know what I hit to close all of it. But it's fine. It's just annoying. I think the full screen... I hit like F12. That shouldn't close the whole thing. It said hit escape to get out of fucking full screen. It lied to me. Oh, this is broken. It's not doing anything. Hold on. Okay, nope, there it goes. What is it? Why does everything look different? What did I do? Oh, now it's opening. Okay, I guess... Oh, actually, I guess there was an update I needed. I think my browser updated, and that's why I did that. Okay, that's fine. Get the music going again. Let me grab a soda. Making great time. Love it. Probably fucked up my camera just now. Live with it. Nobody should be looking down here anyway. Ugh. Is my camera in a good spot? Actually, you know what? It isn't. I should have moved it to the other side. Fuck. Fuck, fuck, fuck. I think it makes more sense to be up here. Alright, let's finish this. Time for the top 10 video games of 2024. Look at all these games, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I will say, so this should be every single game that I touched at all this year, with exceptions being made where need be. But, like, for example, I only played less than 2 hours of. I added these two to the list at the bottom, at the very end, because I don't think I'm going to play any more of them, but I still want to talk about them because they were big and I have things to say. But like I didn't finish them, so they're not technically qualified in my mind in some ways to be here. We'll see. Anyway, so with the video game list being the biggest, in terms of like amount of things that I have to sort, we have pretty much all the same categories. We have the top 10, as we did for TV shows and stuff, but we have top 10, we have honorable mentions, we have mentions, which just means eh, and then we have dishonorable mentions, which means you suck, you're bad, and then we have not qualified or exceptions, for like if I didn't finish a game or else I don't feel like I played enough to put it somewhere on the list, or it didn't come out this year, or some extenuating circumstance like that. I just have that just in case. Although I don't know how much. Quick glance, I don't know what would end up in that section, but I have it there just in case. But it would be games that I don't think I feel. Actually, it would be games that I feel like I don't feel comfortable putting in one of the other three categories because I didn't either play enough of it or. Well, that'd be the main thing. I don't feel like I played enough of it, but I still wanted to say something on it. So let's get the two out of the way. Let's get started, and let's get the two out of the way that I think that applies to right off the bat. Black Myth Wukong. I played like an hour to an hour and maybe just even an hour. I didn't play very long, man. I didn't like it. I didn't like what I played. I had like a up to 2 hour demo for free after on my subscription for PlayStation. And I already knew that I probably wouldn't like it, knowing its pedigree and where it came from. I like the type of game that it's trying to be. I think the visuals at times look good, but really, man, I don't like the discourse around Black Myth Wukong. I don't like where it is in the industry, and I feel real nasty about Black Myth Wukong. There are definitely biases for why that is with me. But I did give it a fair shot. I played it for an hour. I tried not to just be all like, well, and it's really hard because it's one of those situations where maybe the game gets better after you play it for long enough to get into like the real meat of the game and you unlock all the stuff you can do and stuff like that. But I got to the point where I had like a skill list so I could see what skills that you would get later on and that kind of thing, and got an idea for how the combat felt and how long it would take for me to unlock those things. And man, I just didn't feel like it changed my mind on like it probably being like it didn't. I don't think I saw anything in that list that would make it feel good. Let me just put it this way: Sekiro, which is in the same genre, if you don't unlock a single thing in the skill list or any extra moves, do no leveling up, anything like that, Sekiro feels amazing from the jump. You don't need to add anything else. Everything else is an extra on top of how good the core gameplay feels. Black Myth Wukong does not feel like that. And I don't know, it's like that in Stellar Blade, which I didn't even bother to... I played a demo of Stellar Blade, so technically it could be in this list too, but it would be in the same section. I just feel like the quality... Because they're both regarded as, like, good games. Good to great games. And I just am, like, amazed at, like, the people that I see that are giving it that opinion of those games. And I'm just like, man, I respect your opinions, but this... Jesus Christ. I'm not going to talk about it anymore. I don't want this to be, like, a negative way to start the list. But I just wanted to say something about it. I don't like Black Myth Wukong. If you like it, I don't have a problem with that. I just think that I have higher standards for certain aspects of video games, maybe too high of standards, but especially for a game that comes out at full price. It also has some like real visual problems. It's real hard to get playing at full frame rate, even on beefy machines. And even once you get that part working fine, it's like visually there are some like hiccups and weird anti-aliasing, and there's just the visuals don't look great in actual gameplay compared to like the trailers and stuff where it looks fantastic. The trailers looked amazing, but it doesn't, at the end of the day, it doesn't hold up in my eyes at the end. When I played it on a PS5, it was... Anyway, Black Myth Wukong goes there. Space Marine also goes here, but is almost a direct opposite. I played an hour and a half of Space Marine about. I really liked what I played. My problem with it is, I didn't want to pay full price or even half price for Space Marine 2 because it's a game that's best played with a group. Like, you need like one or two other players to really get the most out of Space Marine. It feels good. It is a third-person shooter / there's actually a surprising amount of melee in it. It looks really good, plays really fun, the universe is really fun and interesting to play around with. And I had a good time in my first hour and a half. I only had 2 hours max I could play. But just knowing how much it cost, and that I would pretty much be forced to play with bots instead of friends for the rest of the game when it's really meant to be like a 3-person game, really held it back for me. I didn't hold it back, but I just knew I should try to find somebody else to play through this with if I'm going to spend the money on it. And maybe I might do that next year, because I do kind of want to play it. It is kind of fun. But also it needs some content additions on its like roadmap before it's really a full, complete game. I hear like it's pretty slow to unlock new abilities and stuff. Like, it's very grindy. So they're going to need to add more content for you to do to not make you just have to do like same missions over and over again. So I'm going to wait on that. But I did play it. I did like it. It'll probably make it onto my list somewhere next year. But it's not qualified technically because I didn't play nearly enough of it. Alright. We're going to keep this trend of going from the bottom up. Because generally the stuff that's towards the bottom is stuff that I feel less certain of making the list than the stuff at the top. And as a reminder, there might be games in here that came out in previous years, maybe even super long ago, but this was the year that I played them, and I want to talk about it. So, moving on. Diceomancer is our first actual game on the list that is hot off the presses. I'm playing this game right now. I started this game 2 days ago. It came out, I think, in October. Diceomancer is a Slay the Spire-like, but the entire gimmick of Diceomancer is you play cards, you get into battles with those cards, same way as Slay the Spire. But you have one card that's called the one dice, which now that I'm thinking about it, that's like a very stupid name. I think it's called the one dice, and when you play that card, you get to roll a six-sided die, and whatever the result is, you can change any number that you see on the screen to that number. So it could be the enemy's HP, it could be how much damage one of the cards in your hands does, it could be how much money you have in your pocket. Any number you see on the screen, you can roll a die and make that number, which changes the strategy completely. And there's a lot of other mechanics with rolling the dice and changing other numbers and increasing numbers and decreasing. It can be a little bit like, overall, it can be almost a little bit overwhelming with how much stuff is going on at once. But all of that said, I see the potential. I'm probably going to end up loving it a lot. I have some concerns about the overall format, but we'll see. I played enough of it to put it on the list this year, even though it's not going to make the top 10. I don't think it would make the top 10 anyway, but it's going places, man. So even though I've only played it for like 2 days, barely, it's going to be in my honorable mentions. Next up, My Side, which is a psychological horror game of sorts, in the vein of like a Doki Doki Literature Club almost, or maybe similar to in feel to a mouthwashing, which we're going to talk about later on in this list. Finished that last night. Started it 2 days ago, finished it last night. Starting to get nasally, sinusy. It was fine. A lot of people are popping off about it right now at the tail end of the year because a lot of streamers are playing it, and it fits into that vein of like, oh my god, I can't believe that just happened. It starts out with this concept of like, oh, you have like this virtual waifu that you're taking care of in like a video game, and then she pulls you into the game, and turns out she's not as cute and cuddly as she thought she was, and kind of the usual story and where you think that's gonna go. It didn't really surprise me at any point. Makes a lot of, makes a handful of allusions to other well-known horror games, in some, I wouldn't even say interesting ways, in some kind of very on-the-nose ways. It very much feels to me like a mishmash of good overall ideas and presentation. That's just fine, but it's not as amazing as some people are making it out to sound, in general media. But didn't have a bad time. Finished it. Wasn't super long, so it's not a dishonorable mention. It's just a mention. It was fine. Up next, Another Crab's Treasure. It's gonna be another one in the mentions. Another Crab's Treasure is a Dark Souls-like, where you play as a crab. The gimmick is you're a hermit crab, so you can change your shell, and every shell you change to has different properties, from like different defense to a different, and everyone has a different ability that it'll give you to do, which is pretty fun. So you're not swapping out weapons, you're swapping out shells. And it feels pretty decent, but I really didn't finish it because I feel like the level design got on my nerves. It had big, wide open space level, sprawling level design, not in the way of like a Dark Souls, which the original Dark Souls feels like they kind of had you on like pretty set paths to the point where you can memorize a whole area, and you can really diverge very much from those paths. Like it was very much like a simple spider web of threads of paths and shortcuts to like that circle back around and let you keep going on a path. But it never got like, it was not like a big wide open area generally. There's a lot of wide open areas in Another Crab's Treasure that I felt like made the Dark Souls difficulty more annoying than it needed to be. And like, oh my god, there's like a guy way up like on top of a roof or at top of a tree shooting down arrows on you while you're in the middle of like another fight with somebody who's completely unrelated. And getting that squared away or getting that like dealt with didn't feel as elegant as it does in the Dark Souls games, which make their engagements, like their combat situations, very handcrafted to do a very specific kind of thing, to where you're like, okay, next time I need to go up this way to take care of that guy, the arrow guy, or I just need to be aware the arrow guy is there, but I can deal with it once I know he's there. Another Crab's Treasure isn't that tightly designed. I feel like it's a little bit more loosey-goosey with that stuff. Generally still works, but it got on my nerves enough to kind of like where I didn't feel like going on with it anymore. So it's a mention, not even an honorable mention, but it's not bad. It's solid. Okay. Now, each of these is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 30, 45 games? I didn't know I got up to that many. Jesus Christ. All right. Last time I looked at it, it was just like 31, and then I added some other games to it after that. And it hasn't updated the number since. So we're at 45. God, okay. All right. Let's keep moving. UFO 50 is going to be, I think, might make the top 10. If it doesn't, it'll move down to honorable mentions. UFO 50 is a collection of 50 Nintendo/Super Nintendo-like games, but made with modern design in mind, made by a bunch of different developers, to my knowledge, who all came together. It's like a collaboration project to make up 50 games for this video game system that never actually existed in the late 80s, early 90s. And each of these games it's got 50 games, and each one of them is a full-fledged game. It's not a mini game. It is a full-fledged, like, oh, I only like one game in all of UFO 50. That's as good as any other, like, $20 indie game you could find on Steam today. Like, they are all very fleshed out video games for the most part. They are all pretty impressive. I've played all of them at least once. I have my favorites. I think I have like 10 games I like out of it overall that I would go back to regularly, and maybe more than if I just went back and I didn't have to, like, because obviously I wasn't going to beat all 50. I wasn't going to put that much time into it, but as the year went on, I just kind of would move on to the next games just to make sure I at least touched them and get an idea for what they're about, and then I'd come back to them later to kind of like play the ones that I really liked. But it's going to probably make my top 10 for just how much value there is there and how fun the concept is. Each game comes with like a little info blurb of like where that game came and the history of the fake system and everything. Like, it's cool. It's a good idea. It's going to make my top 10. Gigantic Rampage Edition is a port to modern systems of an old MOBA-like game, like MOBA hero shooter game. Like, Gigantic came out a long time ago. I think it came out in like the 360 era, and then they ported it to modern systems. And now that since I'm a little bit more into MOBAs now, I went ahead and tried it. I bought it, tried it, didn't really like it for a number of reasons. So it's in my dishonorable mentions. That might be being a little harsh, but I think it also had a problem with just like not enough players. The UI was really problematic, and I never really found a character that I like the feel of. I don't really want to talk about it for that much longer. It just wasn't great. I didn't play it for that long. I played it, I'd probably put at least 5 hours into it, 4 or 5 hours, and just came away feeling like, not great. Don't start. We're almost there. Come on, work with me, sinuses. I might have to blow my nose at some point. Death Note, The Killer Within. The Death Note game. It's fine. Never gonna play it again, probably. But it's Among Us with the Death Note characters and some... They did add another stage, which might make me go back to try it again to see what that new stage feels like. Came out late in the year, so didn't get to play it a whole lot, but you really need people to play it that you know to get the most out of it. But yeah, it's Among Us, but with Death Note mechanics, and it's fine. It's fine. But I would be surprised to find out how long it keeps a big enough player base for you to be able to just jump in and play a game with randoms. I really wonder what the player base is like now. I bet it'd be pretty hard. I bet it caps out at like 300 players a day max. But for the few games that I played in it, still had a pretty good time. I think for the most part, it's fine in terms of like its design and what they do with the ideas. It's a little bit complex, but a little bit complex without adding depth. But it's fine. Times in Galaxy, I don't think I put enough time in, but I heard really, like, the reviews for Times in Galaxy were really high, so I wanted to put more time into it, and I saw, like, an article of, like, hidden gems, so I wanted to play it. But I ended up feeling kind of like it's not going to be mind-blowing by the time, like, even if I played more. And plus, it's very story-heavy, so it would take me a lot of time. But to summarize, it's a... imagine Phoenix Wright, the lawyering game, but instead of lawyering, you're reportering. So it does for newspaper reporting what Phoenix Wright did for lawyering. So it gamifies being a reporter in a very fun, interesting way on paper. You go to like scenes where there's going to be a news story or something to write about. You're like you're going there as the first robot press person, and you are talking to everybody at an event and getting their details, getting as much information you can, and then at the end of the event, you put together a headline, a byline, the first sentence to your article, like 5 different things that kind of like form what your article is going to pretty much be about and the tone of the article and everything. And then you get different scores based on that towards different things that you have to kind of balance in terms of like sensationalism and information and so on and so forth. I like everything about the structure. But I don't know if I think it takes like too long. I did about 4 cases before I decided I'd be okay with letting it go, or at least not trying to finish it before the end of the year. It might get a lot better towards the back end, which is why I'm putting it in not qualified, because I feel like I haven't played enough of it to put it anywhere else. But at least the stuff that I played so far, it showed potential of like how I wanted it to make me make tough decisions on doing the thing that's ethically right versus doing the thing that I need to do in order to not piss off my bosses. And I don't think it gets there in the first half of the game. That might happen later on, but that's the thing that I thought might be interesting, and I felt like it wasn't getting there fast enough. So for right now, it's not qualified, and I am not going to spend much longer talking about it, so we can keep this moving. Got a lot to get through. X-Defiant was fine. X-Defiant was Ubisoft's hero shooter, Call of Duty competitor. Ubisoft really wanted a Call of Duty-like that was centered around crossing over all of their universes, all the Ubisoft shooter universes. So, Rainbow Six Siege, Watch Dogs, Ghost Recon. All of those different Ubisoft properties crossed over into this one game, and I enjoyed it. But I just don't think they had enough content fast enough. They didn't have enough to do fast enough. I think it felt pretty good as far as the shooter goes. But, and it's already dead. They're not going to do anything else with it. They didn't hit the numbers they needed to. I don't think their cosmetics were good enough. It was solid, or it was fine as far as one of those shooters go, and it had potential. I like that idea, honestly. I like the Ubisoft catalog of... I like anything that crosses over like that, really. It's fun. It's a fun idea, but couldn't follow through. Didn't do enough to keep people's attention. So, it's already failed and gone, but I will mention it. Cryptmaster... I think I played enough of that to put it in mentions. I almost didn't play enough of it, and it almost deserves to be down here. But I think I put in a solid 3 hours, 3 or 4 hours, maybe less. And I liked what I played, but not enough to feel like I'm going to finish it. So Cryptmaster is just real quickly, it's almost like the concept of it is way more interesting than actually playing it, which is it's always a sad thing to hear. Or you have to be someone who's very much about what it's doing to play it. Let me put it that way. Cryptmaster is a typing game where everything hinges around typing. It's a dungeon crawler, so you're walking through dungeons with a party of adventurers, but like Each of your adventurers, their health is how many letters they have in their name. Their abilities, you have to actually type in manually. So, like, in order to... You're a barbarian. To do an attack in combat, you have to type in hit, H-I-T, or you have to type in boot, I think was to kick people, was boot, B-O-O-T. Like, you literally have to type them in. And in order to learn those abilities, you have to find those letters out in the world. In order to... So every time you open up a chest while you're playing Cryptmaster, the entire game is being narrated by the Cryptmaster, by the way. He's like an evil guy who wants you to help him escape. He brought your party back from the dead to help him escape to the surface. So you're starting at the bottom and you're trying to work your way up. He is the narrator of everything. He's cool. He's funny. And every time you open a chest, the Cryptmaster, you as the party doesn't remember what the Cryptmaster gets out of the chest, but he will give you hints that you have to guess. And that's the fun part. So he will be like, you will open a chest and he will be like, okay, inside this chest was a cross-shaped hard thing. I don't remember what it's called. What is it? And then you'll have like a blank that's like 5 letters long that you need to fill in. So you need to start guessing. You need to start telling him, hey, like hit it and tell me what it's made out of. Lick it, tell me what it tastes like. Smell it, tell me what it smells like. So pretty much you're telling him ways to check the item that he just picked up to describe it, so you can try to figure out what the thing he's describing is. So like you could tell him to like hit it, so he would hit that thing, that cross-shaped hard thing, and be all like, it's metal on one end and it seems like it has a handle on the other end, and that would be enough for you to figure out, oh, this 5-letter word is sword. It's a sword, probably. So you type in sword, and then the 5 letters in sword, if those fit into any of the abilities that you're trying to unlock, like if the next ability for your barbarian has an S in it, then that S will count towards that ability. And then once you fill out the whole ability with letters, you get that ability. Or actually, once you can just guess what that word is, once you just type it in the first time, it gets added to your list of abilities. So you're just steadily going through the world collecting letters to fill in your abilities to get more and more stuff that your characters can do. It's a fun... That's one of the mechanics. That's like the main mechanic. It's a fun idea, a lot of fun concepts, but in practice playing it felt kind of slow and didn't catch my attention. Like the story didn't catch my attention enough, and overall playing it felt a little bit tiring. So I didn't stick with it. I might go back and play more of it, might not, but I like it. But not love it. Not quite an honorable mention. Just because I didn't play enough of it. My hesitation is like it might be worth an honorable mention, but I don't like it that much. I'm going to leave it where it is. I'm going to leave it as a mention. The First Descendant's real bad. The First Descendant is like an MMO third-person shooter type game in the vein of like a Destiny, or I guess Destiny is like the go-to example. It's a bad one of those. It's from Asia. I don't know if it's Korean. I feel like it's... or Chinese. I think it might be Chinese. But either way, it's like an Asian one of those, and horrible. Looks bad. Bad UI. Feels bad. But it was free. It's free to play, so I tried it. Not good. Don't even need to talk about it more. Tekken 8 is going to be my top 10. We'll talk about it more then. I shouldn't even talk about UFO 50 as much as I did, since I'm not going to talk about the top 10 until we get up there. So, Tekken 8 is going to be my top 10. We already know that. Anything that's a lock that quick, we don't need to talk it out. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. I'm gonna put in honorable mention because this might just be a me thing. I fell off of that game hard because I had a personal problem with it. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes is a puzzle game. It has a very cool aesthetic. It has a very cool main character. I didn't know you tried the First Descendant. Yeah, because I only played like maybe 2 hours of it just to try it because it was free, and I didn't mention it because I didn't like it. So there you go. But you know, this is how you learn. It's very bad. Lorelei and the Laser Eyes puzzle game, cool mechanics, cool puzzle format. I didn't like it easy. Nobody did. That game sucks. I liked a lot. I liked the overall puzzles in Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, but I got to a set of puzzles that I felt like broke the logic. I felt like they weren't logical puzzles anymore. They were just puzzles where you just had to do weird shit and hope that it worked. And that's enough to turn me off of a puzzle game. I don't want to put more time into a puzzle game where I might have to be looking up answers for shit that I just couldn't have figured out logically. I don't mind looking up answers when it's just like I'm not seeing it, I'm missing something, but then I am like, oh, I wouldn't have figured that out, but I could see how you can figure it out. I hit puzzles in Lorelei and Laser Eye, but I'm just like, even after seeing what the answer is, I don't get how anybody knew how to do this, and yet I'm seeing so many people put it so high on their top 10s, or it even being like so many like different outlets on the internet putting it in their top 10s or having it in the conversation without running into that problem. Like, they finished it, they really liked the ending, and they really liked the story, and I didn't get to see any of that because I fell off. So it might just be me. I'm going to put it in honorable mentions because I bet it's probably a good game. I just need to ask around of like, hey, how did you guys know that this was the answer, and did you just let that go and not even realize that that might be a problem? Anyway, I'm going to put it in honorable mentions, though, and concede that maybe it's just me missing something. Tactical Breach Wizards is definitely an honorable mention. It might be in the top 10. I'm going to see where my list ends up and come back around to it. I don't think it's going to make the top 10, though. But it's definitely knocking. I'm going to put it at the top of this tier, just to remind me that it might move up. Plucky Squire, bad. Plucky Squire, bad. I was looking forward to the Plucky Squire, you guys. The trailers for the Plucky Squire, super fun. Super good looking. Whole concept is just like you're in a children's book on a table, and shit goes down in the book that makes you your little main character in the book, be able to pop out into 3D world, and pretty much it's like a Zelda-like. While you're outside the book in like 3D world, it's like a Zelda, top-down sword swingy Zelda. And then once you're in the book, it's a little bit more puzzle solvy with like moving words around in order to solve puzzles. Turns out though, all of it is just boring. The combat is boring, the puzzles are boring and slow. It's one of those situations where you know what you need to do, but doing it takes forever. Like you're not. The puzzles are all so easy, you automatically know what the answer is. It's just getting to the solution is boring. It talks a whole lot. It's not particularly funny. It's a big disappointment. I thought the Plucky Squire was going to be one of the best games of the year. Like, it was going to be highly rated at least. So for it to come out and be so just meh, so bleh, very disappointing. Dishonorable mention. Zenless Zone Zero gets a mention. I'm very disappointed in ZZZ for short. Zenless Zone Zero. This is the next game from the Genshin Impact folks, the Honkai 3rd Impact folks. It looks fantastic. It looks so much like it was going to be. It had like Persona levels of style to its UI and its characters, mostly the characters models. Like, its animation and its characters look fan-fucking-tastic. But when you get down to it and you start playing it, it feels like a Bayonetta-like that's just way too easy. Like, I don't know how that game... But on top of that, it's a grindy MMO, free-to-play format. But you're doing Bayonetta, Devil May Cry type stages the whole time. And it's just, from the get-go, way too easy. It doesn't, and I don't see how unlocking more abilities and characters are going to add to like the same thing of like dodge an attack, do an attack back, or switch to a character that has the right element to do more damage to like the enemy, rinse and repeat infinitely ad nauseum, which is a big shame. I really wanted a new long-term game like that to play, especially one that had characters that look so fucking cool, but gameplay wise it's just meh. So guess where it ends up? It just ends up in the mentions. Foam Stars. I played Foam Stars for a bit. I think a dishonorable mention might be a little bit mean. It had potential. Foam Stars, by the way, is just Splatoon for everybody else. Splatoon, but not Nintendo. I'll move it up into a mention. I don't think there was anything particularly wrong with it. I'm pretty sure it was free to play. If it was not free to play, if I'm misremembering that, that might be the main thing that killed it, because it is dead now already after less than a year. It's Splatoon. It's a shooter where you're shooting bubbles in order to cover more of the stage than the enemy team in your color than their color. They do add the verticality to the ability. Since you're shooting bubbles, you can build up like stacks of bubbles, and then you can you can get high ground on top of big stacks of bubbles. So you're actually like, there's more interesting stuff you can do there than in Splatoon, which is all ink that stays on the ground, and so there's no like elevation changing as a result of ink. So that part is at least interesting, but they really just didn't have. It's another situation where they didn't have enough stuff early on, and the main gameplay shooting didn't feel interesting enough. It didn't have nearly, like, Splatoon gets by because it has so many different types of guns and weapons for you to play around with, and Foam Stars didn't have that. So I think it was fine, but it's between mention and dishonorable mention, where it's just like, I could see where it could also be like a dishonorable mention, but I don't feel that bad about it. I just feel like it was kind of like everything else in this. It was just meh. It was just like, eh. I see what you tried to do there, but you didn't hit it. Helldivers 2, for me, is going to be an honorable mention. It's not going to even break the top 10 for me. It started out really strong, but as somebody who doesn't have like a steady play group in order to be able to play that game, and even if I did, I feel like I was done with like overall what that game was doing after my like 4th or 5th play session. Like, after playing enough to be, like, go up against all the different, the 3 factions that were in the game back then, the insects, the robots, and the, or is it only 2 factions, and then they added the 3rd? I think it was only 2, so it was just robots and fucking bugs. After going up against those 2, and there was big gaps between when I played, so they added new stuff. But I never really got over just, like, the feeling of just, like, man, I'm just doing the same stuff. And not really, like, I really like the format. I get why it was, like, I had fun with it. But let me put it this way. If I get a group together to play a game over and over again every week, once a week, 4 people who agree to play the same game every week at least, or maybe 2 times a week, we get together, we have a night where we always play a certain game, the 4 of us. I have so many other games I would rather do that with than Helldivers 2. That's what it comes down to. If I could get a steady group of 4 people who are down to play whatever, or a game, there's so many other games, probably even this year, that I would enjoy doing that with more than Helldivers 2. That said, I don't think Helldivers 2 is bad. It has its issues with the community here and there. Just for me personally, it's one of those things where I'm just like, eh. It's just north of a mention for me. It is fine. It is good. I get the appeal. I get why so many other people love it so much, and how much fun it is streaming it and laughing with your friends about the silly shit that happens. But, you know, after the silly stuff, you want to get a little bit, you want to make more progress. You want to do stuff that's actually kind of more difficult. And once you get to that point, it just gets kind of like, I don't know. I didn't get to the point where I was even able to do like the super hard stuff. So anyway, I'm going to put it in the honorable mentions. Omori should probably be in my top 10, but I feel bad putting it in the top 10 because it came out in like 2020 or 2021. It was a long time ago. It's just that I just now got around to playing it. And it's in the same vein as Undertale, and like it's an Undertale type game. It's not an Undertale like, but I just mean like it's a very simple graphics, or like 2D sprite graphics ish kind of an art style, or not even sprites, or not pixelated sprites, but I guess still sprites. It's like more like color and pencil drawing, but it tells a story. I like the story a whole lot. It's a very creepy story, or it's like a fun psychological story, without getting into the details or spoiling anything, because I don't want to spoil it here, but it is a really good game. I think it was like a solid 20, somewhere between 20 and 30 hours. I really enjoyed it. I played it earlier this year, but it's only going to make an honorable mention because I would feel bad putting a game so old on my top 10, and I also think that it would be pushed out anyway. I'm not even confident that UFO 50 is going to make the top 10, but it probably will. We'll see together. All right, 2 more rows left. Let's do this. Give me a second. Let me take a drink. Some of these I can knock out pretty quick. I just have to stop giving as much information as I am about the smaller titles. Well, actually, there's not too much that's small left. These last couple of rows are hardcore in terms of where the shit. Like, I think we got through most of like the mentions and dishonorable mentions. There's still some left, but we're mostly going to be talking in these top 2 rows from here on out. Mostly. Starting, that said, Egg Squeeze is going to be a mention. Egg Squeeze is a cute little game. Very small, very fun, or very simple. Played it just because of a friend, but I had fun with it, so that's why I'm mentioning it. Egg Squeeze is just like a cheap little Steam game where you are signed up to do these psychological tests to figure out if you're psychic, and all you do is you hold down, I think, the mouse button to squeeze an egg, and you're trying to squeeze the egg for as long as you can without crushing it, like without going over the time. The time is random each time. You have absolutely no indication of how long you need to hold the egg. But the closer you get, the longer you go without breaking it. Like, the closer you get to the breaking point before you let go, the more points you get. So it's about, like, how long will you hold it before you think it's going to crack. And you just do that over and over again to get your score high enough. Because if you build up a combo if you go so many without breaking an egg while earning at least enough points to go towards your combo. And then it starts throwing all this other shit on the screen to distract you while the egg squeezing is going on. I beat it. Like, there is an end game. There is a way, like, after you get your score high enough, you do beat the game. It's not super long, depending on how not psychic you are. But it was fun. It was silly. It had a little story, even, to it. Not a super serious one, but I'm mentioning it. I think it was worth a mention. It's even almost an honorable mention, just because it's also, like, super cheap and just, like, a fun little... It's practically a toy. It's practically a toy. But I'm not going to call it an honorable mention, because... It's in between mention and honorable mention. I'll put it towards the front of the list just to show that. There you go. Honorable mention that could have been honorable. Next up, I didn't actually list a lot of the... At least I don't think I did. I skipped listing a lot of the stuff I played for October. I usually skip those games because a lot of them I'm only playing once or twice and not long enough to get like a real full picture on how good the games are. But I did finish Fears to Fathom, the Woodbury something. The Woodbury Getaway is what it's called. And I think it's fine. I think the first one of this is like another anthology series of scary games based on real stories, true stories to my knowledge. This one was solid, but not as good as the first one. I've only played 2 of them. The very first one, which I think you can play for free, was a lot more effective, and it was even a lot simpler of a story than this one. This one had its moments, but it was fine. Not as scary or as effective, gonna have to blow my nose, as the first one. So it ends up in the mentions. Click holding is going to be a mention? Yeah. Click holding is a guy and you and another guy in a mask, a silly looking mask with a big huge nose. I think he has a gun the whole time. I think he has a gun. And he just sits with you in a motel room and he just tells you to click a clicker like he would use to count people who are coming into like a amusement park or to an event. One of those clickers that just counts up. And he just wants you to sit there and click it. In real life, you're clicking your mouse. And he wants you to click 10,000 times. I want to say is the number. He wants you to get up to 10,000 times. And he just wants to sit there and watch you click it. And if you do that, then you get a bunch of money towards your medical bills. So you're doing it because you need the money. Nothing physical, nothing sexual. It is obviously referring to stuff that's sexual. Like it is referring to being like a fetishy thing. But the actual game, there's no nudity, no actual like contact like that. A little bit outline of a story to like why he's doing it and what happens at the end after you reach the end of those clicks. He does fun things while you're clicking of being like, hey, I want you to click while you're looking at this photo. And then he'll just be all like, no, that's not doing anything for me. Come back to the bid. Like stuff like that. It's a fun little game. Not super expensive. Doesn't take very long to do all the clicks. If you can just hold the button down. So you don't have to click literally 10,000 times. You can just click and hold it, and it'll click steadily at a steady pace if you don't want to get carpal tunnel over a single video game. But otherwise, fun little thing. Just mentioning it because it's super cheap. I think it's like less than $5. The Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection will get an honorable mention, but not a top 10. Mostly because it is a collection of some games that have not been available. Marvel vs. Capcom games that have not been available otherwise to play at all whatsoever. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is in this collection. That's pretty much the thing that matters. There has not been a way to play Marvel vs. Capcom 2 legally on consoles for over a decade, I believe. So it's a big deal that it got released again, and we're also getting a follow-up collection that is going to have CVS 2, Capcom vs. SNK 2 in it. Looking forward to that, along with some Power Stone. Like the second collection, honestly, is one that I'm probably going to play more because it has games in it that I haven't spent as much time with as Marvel vs. Capcom 2. But either way, still worth mentioning as a big deal for the FGC community for that to be coming back. Next, we have Vulgar 2, which is going to get an honorable mention. Vulgar 2 is a sequel to Vulgar 1, which is pretty much a 2D Souls-like. Super high difficulty. You die in one hit unless you have armor, and then for every piece of armor you get, that's one more hit you can take. If you die, you go all the way back to the checkpoint or start over. That kind of thing. So a Dark Souls-like, but 2D. The first one was super good. Second one was almost too easy compared to the first one. I managed to beat the second one a lot more easily than the first one. But I do think I didn't play like the true ending, which is worth getting to. There's some extra hoops you have to jump through in order to get like the actual final ending, and I think there's more stages that are more interesting involved with that from my rough understanding. But I'm too lazy. I don't feel like going back to do that. Maybe I'll do it this year if it gets slow enough. But with that said, that leaves it at an honorable mention for me, maybe even just above a mention. Just because not as good as the first one, which I think had a better spread of difficulty than this one. Astrobot's definitely gonna be in the top 10. We'll talk about it later. Nightmare Kart is fun. Nightmare Kart is an absolutely free Mario Kart, or let me say, it is a completely free Bloodborne-based Mario Kart game, which only really had to change its name after the Bloodborne people came after them at the last second, which they were prepared for. I'm happy that they were already like, alright, if this happens, we can still put this game out, we just have to switch these models and names like we knew we might have to. But the initial idea was, we're going to put out, like, somebody made an April Fool's video of Bloodborne but Mario Kart a couple of years ago, and then that blew up so much they made it into an actual game. A full-on arcade mode or campaign mode, multiplayer split screen Mario Kart game based on the characters from Bloodborne. And then right before they were set to come out, a couple of months, like 2 or 3 months before they were set to come out officially, Sony came after them, or whoever came after, FromSoft came after them and was like, no. So then they just had to make slight tweaks. They took anything that was obviously Bloodborne out, and they changed names around and changed some of the models, like the textures, in order to get, it's still Bloodborne. It's still close enough, but it's not exactly the characters from Bloodborne. Anyway, plays pretty well. Plays pretty good. And looks pretty good. Had a lot of fun with it. And it's completely free. Honorable mention. Download it whenever. I honestly should have thought about playing it at the get-together we had this past weekend. It would have been funner. Because we ended up playing Mario Kart. But it would have been pretty cool for me to remember to bring that out and let us play multiplayer in that. We still need to do that at some point. Against Great Darkness is my, like, Steam Deck game of the year. This was the year that I've got my first Steam Deck. Didn't ever think that I wanted one. Turns out that I really love it. And Against Great Darkness is the first game I got that really fit just on my Steam Deck. I didn't want to play it enough on my big screen TV, and I wouldn't have wanted to play it on my phone because you need more space than what's on a phone screen. It is like the quintessential Steam Deck game, and as far as gameplay and what you're doing in it, it's really just like a shoot 'em up. It's a roguelike shoot 'em up, so that means like a Galaga or a 1942 or whatever those games are, where you're just like a little ship and you have to shoot the enemies at the top of the screen. But with roguelike elements, so you're picking every stage, you're picking an ability, like Hades, which is an easier idea. And that's it's Hades, but a shoot 'em up because you're even like an angel, a fallen angel trying to escape from hell, I think, and you're getting the assistance of other angels throughout history who each give you like different lines of power, similar to like in Hades, the different gods of Olympus giving you different types of powers. The different angels in this game give you different types of powers, blah, 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 similar. But it's a shoot 'em up. Feels real good. I unlocked all the characters, beat the game with all the characters that you could get. Had a lot of fun with it. Not in my top 10, but highly recommended even if you don't have a Steam Deck. I think it's still like a fun PC game even in that case. A lot of fun. And if it's on consoles or PlayStation or whatever, it would be a good time. Arctic Eggs. I really love Arctic Eggs. I'm going to put Arctic Eggs over here. Arctic Eggs is a really weird game. One of two egg-based games I played this year. One right after the other. Arctic Eggs is a weird post-apocalyptic, almost, or seemingly post-apocalyptic game setting where you're in, like, Antarctica, and you are the designated egg cooker of the entire area. Nobody else is allowed to cook eggs except for you, and you have to do it. You have to cook it for everybody in the entire colony in Antarctica in order to impress the top dog. The Saint of 8 Stomachs wants you to cook for everybody, and that's the only way you can earn the right to cook for the Saint of 8 Stomachs. It has a weird vibe, but it's hard to describe. It's like a cyberpunk Antarctica psychological vibe where everybody kind of like talks like they've got something psychological or philosophical to say, but in like the stupidest way. It's a lot of fun. And your main thing for the cooking is you control the pan and you hold down a button in order to actually start cooking the egg. You're just cooking sunny side up eggs for everybody in the beginning. So you have to cook it on one side and then you have to physically flip the egg over and then cook it on the other side. And the pan control is kind of like a QWOP or kind of like one of those physics games where you're supposed to fuck it up. Like it's supposed to be hard to do. Like a getting over it with Bennett Foddy. Like one of those types of games where like the physics is what makes it fun. So you start out just cooking a single egg on both sides takes a while to get down. Like it's the tutorial of just doing that, of flipping an egg and catching it in the same pan is something you learn to do. And then later on, once you're cooking for other people, they start having really crazy requests of like, hey, cook me 2 eggs, but also throw my cigarette in there because I like the taste of the ash mixed in. And it turns out that you have that cigarette is really just a timer. So not only do you have to keep the cigarette in the pan along with the eggs, like when you're flipping them, you have to make sure the cigarette doesn't fly out. You have to cook the eggs before the cigarette completely burns out. So it's like a timer. Like, it's like stuff like that. So you get to the point where they're throwing in stuff like bullets and cockroaches and drinks and all other kinds of stuff into your pan, and they all have a different mechanic that you have to do on top of cooking the eggs that's with them. Very cool, very fun. Would be at the bottom of maybe making it in my... It's probably an honorable mention. A super strong honorable mention. It's a fun little cheap thing. Mouthwashing is another one that might break my top 10. I don't think so. Just in case I'm putting it at the top of my honorable mentions. This is a game that everybody likes a whole lot this year. The more time that goes by, it seems like more and more people are realizing how good mouthwashing is, including myself, after hearing other people talk about it and some other details of what happens in the story. Without going into spoilers, it is a psychological thriller about a space crew, on a space truck, like a trucker crew, hauling cargo for a company. And while they're in outer space on like a multiple months long voyage, the business goes out. Their company goes out of business, and is pretty much like, so you guys, we can't give you any more resources, so you guys are kind of fucked. And dealing with, it's obviously a thing on capitalism, and the overall themes of that play a part, but also it's a very personal story between the people in the crew, and what ultimately leads to, seemingly, the very first thing that happens in your vision of the game is you are playing as the captain, and you are deliberately steering the ship into an asteroid. You don't get a choice. You have to steer it into the asteroid. That is what you were sitting down to do. That's the very first thing you do in the game. You don't know why. You don't know exactly who you are, but it seems like you're the captain steering into an asteroid, and that causes the events of everything else in the game after that. Where you bounce back and forth between before the asteroid and after the asteroid, and the story just kind of goes from there. It's about a 4 to 5 hour experience. There's a little bit of gameplay, some puzzle solving towards the end, some stealth sequences. Some of it can get a little bit too much gamey, like for what it's trying to do. Like the mini games or the situations you're trying to do can get a little bit but overall, very interesting presentation. Some visual stuff in it is very first time I've seen it in a video game. Like the way that they use broken screen elements on purpose to make things like feel psychologically fucked up. Really cool. Mouthwashing is definitely a highlight of the year, but not in my personal top 10. I'm probably gonna blow my nose after I finish this row. Interaction isn't explicit. I'm gonna call this an exception. So this little thing is worth mentioning, but it's a weird little thing. It came out officially on PlayStation Network, which isn't as hard to do these days, but it's still, for what it is, it's very interesting that that's where it ended up. I don't know if it's on anything else except for the PlayStation Network. I don't know if it's on like PC or Steam or anything. But Interaction Isn't Explicit is a weird little video game essay explaining some concepts about video games by making a video game. So in the way that a video essay on YouTube will talk about a piece of media and analyze it, this is that kind of thing, but about video game concepts in general, and you're playing through the concepts as they happen. It's very hard to describe. I barely remember the exact things they talk about. It kind of talks about some higher level video game design stuff without being too heady about it, but enough that I can't explain it off the top of my head now. And also, it's been a couple of months since I played through it. But I'm only mentioning it because it's an official thing that got released on PlayStation, and it's completely free. Takes about an hour or less to get through, and I just wanted to mention it just because it was really interesting. But it's not exactly fun, but it's not meant to be, so that's why I consider it as an exception. It's not something that I would recommend to people to do. It's mostly for me, but I did want to just mention that it exists, just in case somebody that's listening to this and just like, that sounds interesting, let me just check that out, and wants to like Google it or whatever. But it might only be on PlayStation, so in that case, I'm probably the only person who's ever going to play it. Indiana Jones is probably not going to make my top 10, but it was a lot better than I expected it to be, so it's around here somewhere in my honorable mentions. It came out late in the year. I had no intentions of playing Indiana Jones. It came out like mid-December. Early to mid-December. But then people started playing it and being like, oh my god, this might be my game of the year for Indiana Jones. And I was like, okay, that's enough. I'm hearing high enough praise for me to at least need to touch this game, and I ended up playing all the way through it. It's about 12 hours to play through if you don't do too much of the side stuff. And it is a lot better. They do a lot better job of making an Indiana Jones game that doesn't feel like a Tomb Raider or Uncharted wannabe game. Like, they make an Indiana Jones game that feels like an Indiana Jones game, if that's easier to say, if that's understandable. It's very impressive. You're playing, it's first person. You go through the majority of the game not shooting people. You always have the option for the most part to start shooting, but it's almost always a worse idea than just sneaking around or knocking people out from behind and finding ways of doing that, or using your whip, or just getting into fist fights and just using like whatever random weapon you can find on the ground. All of those are almost always easier options than using guns, because guns immediately make everybody else in the area start shooting at you and just raises the alarm for everybody to come after you. So it's an option you always have, but it's a game that makes it feel like the bad option to do, which is very unexpected in a video game of its sort. Other than that, feels like a good Indiana Jones movie. Feels like good characters, great graphics, good solid green gameplay. Doesn't overstay its welcome for the most part. I did towards like the back end, like the back half. I kind of got sick of doing the side stuff and pretty much just mainlined the story from that point, about the halfway point or 3/4 point. That's not a negative necessarily. The part of that was because I really wanted to finish it before the end of the year with a little bit of time left to spare for the other games. But even then, I was pretty much like, yeah, I get the point. So honorable mention, but not gonna make the top 10. Thousand X Resist, definitely in the top 10. No questions asked. Zet Zillions, honorable mention. Zet Zillions is a game from a studio that I like a whole lot now, although I can't remember the name of them at all. But they've made 2 games now that I really love the aesthetic and the feeling of. Last time it was Wolfstride, which I think was on my top 10 list 2 years ago, or maybe just last year, I think. And this one's called Zet Zillions. So the studio that make these very anime-inspired, very anime-feeling, like as far as like the writing and the visuals and the dialogue, super leans into like Fooly Cooly, Gurren Lagann inspired, Kill la Kill, Studio Trigger in general kind of feeling projects. Some Cowboy Bebop in the last one, but this one is specifically just like Diceomancer, which is right next to. It's actually a card roguelike game, but with all that aesthetic choices that I just mentioned, where you're playing, you're playing as an entire planet. Your ship is an entire planet in outer space, and you are going around the galaxy, blowing up and fighting other planets. And that's fun. It's just a fun anime, stupid idea where you're shooting out people as your ammo on your planet against other planets or other planet-sized aliens and shit. It's super good. It's also just like a really good one of those. It has a lot of buggy issues, to be honest. It's very buggy. But aside from that, I liked it a lot. I pretty much got to the end of the main story, but they keep adding so much content so constantly. I don't know where that is now. But I got to the end of the main story after playing for a good amount of time. So, highly recommend. Zet Zillions is an honorable mention on this list, but it won't make the top 10. And now, to clear out this row before I take I'm going to keep going. I'm just going to take a drink break and give my throat a break. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero gets a dishonorable mention. It's trash. I shouldn't have bought it. I knew I shouldn't have bought it, but I was like, man, so many people are so hype about this game, and they have so many characters that I think I would like to play in this game, and then I got it and immediately regretted my choice. I'm not going to go into detail, but it's too complicated as far as fighting systems go. There's way too many mechanics and buttons and button combinations to remember. And even if you don't interact, or even if you don't use all of those combinations, if you just use like the casual stuff, like obviously if somebody who plays a lot of fighting games feels like they can't remember all this shit that's happening, when I'm playing against other people in my friend group, they're probably going to remember about the same amount of stuff in their heads as me. But at that casual level, it's still not all that fun. It's fine. But, I mean, I like the Tenkaichi games better than this. And the character models look pretty good at times, but everything else about the game looks like dog shit. The environment looks like dog shit. The UI is one of the worst UIs in a video game I've seen in the modern era. Horrible UI. As in all of the menus and the start in like the main menu and the character selection screen, all of that looks fucking amateurish. It's horrible, and yet is one of the best-selling games of the year. So they've gotten the wrong message. Although the player base has fallen off because all those people who bought it are just like, oh my god, this game looks so good, and it's Dragon Ball, and I love Dragon Ball. They went online, and they started playing against other people who've put in actual effort to learn how the game works, got their ass beat without even being able to press a button, and then they quit playing. So it's not great. Alright, give me a second. I'm gonna take a second, take a couple of drinks, just not talk for a second to catch back up, and then we're gonna get through this last row, and then we are on schedule for this to take probably 30 minutes to an hour longer. If I can knock out this row. If I knock out this row, and I keep explaining as I go, I might not have to explain as much when it comes to ordering my top 10, so that's probably not going to take as long as I think. We just got to get through this row. Almost there. Just give me a second to check my phone. Okay. That's dumb. Do I know this person? Nope. I got a new follower, but they seem like a spam account. Alright. Let's wrap this up. Or let's start hitting the end game. We've only got 4 games in our top 10 so far. But a lot of these games coming up, I think, are going to jump up there, too. We'll see. Home Safety Hotline gets a honorable mention. Home Safety Hotline is a fun little, I think, like, less than $15 game on Steam where I played it. I think it's actually on consoles now, too. Where you play as... Your interface is like an old 1990s Windows 95 kind of computer. And you're just at that computer... taking phone calls from people having issues in their home that they need like an exterminator for, they think, or some other kind of like, it's your job to take their call and then tell them what their issue is, or tell your company what the issue is so that your company sends out the right person to fix it. And at first it's stuff like, and all you're looking at on the video on your computer is a list of all the different things, all the different pests that could be in a home, with all the details of that pests. And so you'll get a phone call and this person will be like, hey, I'm hearing scratching noises in my walls and I'm finding like droppings near the doorways or whatever. I don't know what it is. Can you send somebody to help? So you look through your catalog and you're like, oh, it sounds like rats is probably what this person has. You'll look at the rats and it'll say like, frequent indications that you have rats include sounds in the walls and droppings throughout the home, or droppings and visible droppings that look like this somewhere. So you'll just have like a full catalog of pests to look through, get a phone call, find it, tell them, hey, it's rats, hang up, move on to the next thing. The twist is these pests start getting creepier and more fantastical. So like it'll be like, oh, I have this problem where at night it feels like I'm very itchy under my sheets, and it feels like it's a little bit moist and gooey when I wake up, and I also end up with these rashes, like almost that look like bite marks. And then you look through your list of pests, and it'll be like, oh, that's bid teeth. You have bid teeth is the issue you have, which is actually just teeth that start developing on your covers for one reason or another. Like creepy stuff like that. All the way up to like full on like, oh, you've got a poltergeist, or you've got a ghost, or you've got some other crazy shit. Usually not stuff that's boring. Like they made a set of creatures that refer to stuff that's in common lore or common mythology, and they just make up some other stuff that's really creepy. Very fun, not super long, but yeah, that's Home Safety Hotline. Big recommend. Honorable mention. Indica, I played just at the end of the year. I think I played it over the weekend, this past weekend even. Or late last week, one or the other, after Christmas. Indica gets an honorable mention. It's been a lot higher on other people's lists this year, but I think this is as high as it's going to go for me. It is a story-heavy experience game about a nun in Russia. Probably around Cold War times, Russia. But a young nun, I think she's like, at the time of this game, probably like 17 or 18. Probably 18. In a convent. And it's very obvious that A, she didn't want to be a nun. She's there against her will, and all the other nuns fucking hate her. All the nuns fucking hate her. For reasons. You obviously find out those reasons somewhat throughout as you play through the game, and Indica is sent on for the first time since she started being a nun for like a year or so, she's allowed to leave the monastery or leave the convent in order to deliver a letter into another convent. So she's allowed to walk across the countryside for the first time, and you play as her doing that. Along the way, it's not a spoiler, it's like the main thing, she runs into an escaped convict, and they kind of work together to go onto this journey for reasons, and a story is being told about Indica's struggles with sin, and she literally has the devil talking to her. She hears the devil talking to her, and she gets into back and forth with the devil about what it means to be like religious, why you should be religious, what even that means. Like a lot of good conversations happen, like a lot of good writing happens between her and the devil. A lot of good writings happens between her and the prisoner she's going with. And obviously she's a young girl who's barely through puberty, or like on the other side of puberty, so she has her own wants and needs that she's fighting with in her mind. But there's video game mechanics that are directly attached to these ideas and themes, so it's not just like a walk and talk experience. Like there's a lot more puzzles and gaminess in it than you might expect without getting into spoilers. In fact, I will spoil that there is a tech tree. There is a skill tree in this game. Let me put it that way. That should say a lot more about, like, it's more of a game than any of the things I just said makes it sound. Highly recommend. It's kind of pricey for what it is, how long it is. It's like about a 3.5 to 4 hour game, but it is like I think it's a $25 to $30 game on Steam and elsewhere. So it's a little bit pricey, but in return you get better graphics than normal. Like it's got like AA graphics almost, like production values. Like it's kind of impressive looking for the size and of the crew that made it, to my knowledge. Honorable mention. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erd Tree is not going to make my top 10. Only going to make my honorable mentions. I need to go blow my nose. That's what I was going to do when I finished that row, was blow my nose. Just going to say, it's more Elden Ring. It's very good more Elden Ring. Probably overall, I like the Shadow of the Erd Tree content, DLC, overall more than the original content in Elden Ring. For multiple reasons. I like the bosses more. I like the environments, the variety of environments more. I like the variety of weapons and options you have in combat more. So overall, I think Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree better than base Elden Ring. Not enough, but I still don't feel great putting a DLC expansion into my top 10. Gonna blow my nose after this. Excuse me. Because you can't, and it's not even like a DLC that you could be like, well, I just want to try Shadow of the Erdtree and just play that. It's not standalone. Even if you already have an Elden Ring save going, you may not be able to just jump into this DLC, which is my problem. You have to do a boss fight in the base Elden Ring game that like 80% of players didn't even reach. It's an optional boss fight that almost nobody did in order to access this DLC. I don't think that's a huge criticism or problem with it, but I do feel like it should be taken into consideration. I don't think it should be completely ignored like some people are doing. I come somewhere in the middle of just like, yeah, on top of that, I don't like the idea of Elden Ring getting to be like Game of the Year, for example. Not that it did, but like the same game shouldn't get to re-up its awards for adding on content to an existing game, unless it's obviously, you know, best DLC or best expansion of the year. I don't feel great being like, Elden Ring was my top 5 game of the year last year, and Elden Ring DLC this year is my top 5. Like, I don't like the way that feels. But I get the argument anyway, either way. So like if somebody else did their top 10 and they had Elden Ring on it, I would completely understand, and I think that's fair. I'm not somebody who thinks either way strongly about it. I get arguments on both sides. But that's where I fall on it, is like, me personally, I don't like the idea of Elden Ring getting to be like, well, we added, like, what if it was like still really good, but it was like not nearly as much content? Like, what if it was like half as long as it was, like half as much content as it was, but it's still very good? Like, how small does that amount of content get before you're like, well, we can't just judge this on its own now it is like an addition to Elden Ring and shouldn't be in consideration. Like, that is stuff that's just like so much of a gray area that I don't feel like hashing it out here, but it should be mentioned. I think I'm on the other side of my sinus stuff. Yeah. If anything happens again, I'm just going to stop immediately, go blow my nose, and come back. I lied. I'm going to go blow my nose. Be right back. Alright, all cleared out. And I was almost, the music is so quiet now, I almost forgot that it was going. Let me know if the music is too quiet. I don't think it really matters. But I do want it to be loud enough to where, you know, let me just check on my own. Let me see what it sounds like. Nah, that's good. Yeah. It's like ambient. That's like good enough for me. Okay. Let's wrap this up. I'm all cleared and ready to go. Thank Goodness You're Here is going to get an honorable mention. Not going to make my top 10. One of the funniest games of the year, depending on your sense of humor. It is like, Thank Goodness You're Here is a video game long SNL skit, but from Britain. Like, it is a British comedy game, and almost the entire, that's the vibe that I could say. Hold on, let me take care of this stupid spam bot in chat. It's a British comedy game, and that is entirely what it's about. It borders on being a point-and-click adventure, but it's more because you're directly controlling a little character guy going through all kinds of like crazy British adventures in this town where you're just like, you're initially just wanting to talk to the mayor, and the mayor is busy, so you just like, so the secretary is like, come back later and you'll be able to talk to him. And then you just get into hijinks throughout the city with all the rest of the people in the city, and it's all just British humor, which I think is done very well. It's a little bit long for what it is. It's a little bit too long, and you have to do a little bit too much backtracking through the same areas over and over again. Like, by the time the game is over, you will have run through the entire town from beginning to end, probably about 4 or 5 times, doing different things in each of those areas. Like, you have reason to do it, and they change stuff when you go back through. Like, they have running gags that they change when you do it, but not often enough and not funny enough to make it as not feel like, this could have been a little bit shorter. It might have been like a higher recommend if you didn't kind of overstay your welcome a little bit. But it is, if you can get behind the kind of like slightly adult, like tongue-in-cheek British sexual humor here and there, like obviously you see a silhouette of a person and it's obviously supposed to be like them like jacking off, but not really. It's like a police officer in the booth like cleaning his stick, his baton that he hits people with. He's like cleaning it, but the silhouette makes it look like he's doing something else. Like, it's like that kind of a joke kind of a thing. But it is legitimately funny to me in a lot of ways. I wasn't laughing out loud like Konosuba levels of like funny, but it put a smile on my face most of the time. I got the jokes. I would laugh a little bit here or there, and it's just so hard to do humor in video games as your main appeal that I want to mention it as an honorable mention. But obviously, comedy is so subjective, so the next person can play it and just not find it funny at all. So, just worth mentioning. Balatro is going to be in the top 10 this year. Where? We don't know. Somewhere around there. Mullet Mad Jack is going to get an honorable mention to me, but just barely. It's just above a regular mention, which means, put quickly and simply, Mullet Mad Jack is a first-person, an all-speed, all the time, first-person shooter where you're running through levels as fast as possible, one-shotting or kicking enemies, robot enemies in this cyberpunk 1980s style anime aesthetic world, and it's pretty fun, not super long, but doesn't overstay its welcome, just so. It was almost too long by the end, but I think that it manages to hit the mark of just like almost too long, but not quite, as far as like its gameplay takes you. It's kind of a roguelike as well, where you're going on runs, and if you die, you go back to the very end, or you go back to the very beginning of that level. And along the way, you keep unlocking new weapons and new abilities in a very Hades roguelike way. So it's like that, but you know, it comes together to make a pretty good game, a pretty solid little game, but not great. So it is at like the bottom of my honorable mentions, almost just a mention, but it was good. Metaphor is a top 10 game, definitely. In Stars and Time is technically not a 2024 game. I think it came out late last year, and I'm just now slow to getting around to it or something like that. Or maybe the Steam release wasn't until 2024, but it was out on like itch.io or some other stuff. I don't remember. If it didn't have that caveat, it might have been in my top 10. And I'm not even sure that caveat really exists, because I'm not sure if that was the case or if it just came out this year and I'm just wrong. I'm pretty sure it came out last year, though, when I see it on most release date lists. So I'm going to act like it's not a this year game. And I'm not sure, looking at my top 10 so far, if it would break the top 10. But I do like it a lot, and I do recommend it a lot. It's very highly recommended. Long story short, it's in the same vein of video game, of RPG, as Omari and Undertale. Story heavy, with meta mechanics happening about your main character, who is the rogue in a party of adventurers. You know, you have like your generic mage and, well, not generic at all, but like if you just think of like your average party, your healer, your mage, your barbarian equivalent, and you're the thief, you're the rogue. And you get the ability to start looping through time as your adventurers try to do your final fight to go and kill the king who is destroying the kingdom. But you are the only one who's aware that you are looping in time whenever stuff goes wrong, and it takes a toll on your character the more loops you go through. Like, your main character mentally starts feeling the strain of doing all these loops while everybody else around you is unaware, but they occasionally can pick up on the fact that you're not right, the fact that something's wrong. And the story plays out, and it goes into like some really good writing. The characters are all really super great. I love all the characters. I love the writing. The gameplay itself is pretty good for a turn-based battle system in one of these. Pretty solid. I didn't say that about Amori, but also Amori has like a really fun, good one of these, like good enough turn-based battle system for somebody who doesn't like turn-based RPGs that much. I've come to a point in my older life where I'm like, I actually am okay with turn-based battles. I probably just am not specifically okay with the old way that Final Fantasy used to do turn-based battles. But almost every other turn-based RPG, I end up being okay with. It's not my favorite type of fighting system, but I can definitely like it. And it turns out that I just don't like Final Fantasy, like pre-Final Fantasy modern day turn-based fighting is like not good to me, or very boring. And even now I could play one of those and probably be like, it's fine. Anyway, In Stars and Time has like a good one of those, good story, good characters, great game. Might have cracked the top 10 if I played it the year that it came out, but I think this year it wouldn't make it anyway. Maybe. We'll see. If anything, it might swap spots with whatever ends up being in the 10 slot in my top 10, if I had to guess. Persona 3 Reload is not going to make the top 10. It's the first time I played Persona 3. It's the last of the modern Personas I haven't played. A very good remake that brings it into the modern day in terms of like, 'cause Persona 3 was originally a PS2 game, I believe. Yeah. And so it updates it to look like Persona 5 level graphics and UI and music, new voice acting, I think I heard, and slight changes to the story here and there to smooth things out, but really the same game as back then. A lot of people love Persona 3. I get the feeling, I see why it's the first Persona, and I really like that I played it right before playing the most modern version of Persona, which is Metaphor. That really made the comparison between those two games of like where Persona came from and where it is now. It really made me appreciate it more. But anyway, Persona 3 is great. Really great remake. I have no complaints, but it's not going to break into the top 10 because Metaphor exists. Otherwise, it might have taken that spot, but Metaphor exists. Let me just put it there. But Persona is Persona. If you don't know what Persona is, I can explain it later. But it's an JRPG, really great style. Not as good, even though as like I still like Persona 5 more. And it might be tied with Persona 4 for me. Actually, no, I probably still don't even like it as much as Persona 4, but I never played Persona 4 all the way through myself. I just watched it. So technically, I probably should say I like it more than Persona 4, just because I'm not entirely sure I'm willing to play all the way through 4. But I like it. And I still have the DLC to do for it too, which I will probably actually do eventually next year. But it's there. Honorable mention. Prince Persia: The Lost Crown, also coming in hot off the presses. I finished that 3 days ago or so now. 2 or 3 days ago. Honorable mention, easy. It is worth the hype. I know a lot of people are outlets that are like, this is our game of the year, or it's like in our top 5 games of the year. I don't think it's going to crack it for me. It had the potential. It's just that this year was very stacked. This year was very stacked, and in terms of like good games, and it doesn't quite. It's not like the best Metroidvania I've ever played, even though it does some good things for the genre. It is a very high tier Metroidvania. Like, I'd put it up there with Castlevania: Symphony of the Night, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Hollow Knight for some people, not for me. I think it is a very top-tier Metroidvania. The combat is deeper than it needs to be, but it still feels pretty good, but not great. It feels pretty great with some caveats. I think the timing, the animation on attacks so that you can parry them is not as elegant as I like. Like, I could still do it, but there are just sometimes some attacks in the game that were like, this animation doesn't do a good job of letting me know when I need to parry very well. I don't feel as good about it, which is going to segue into one of my other games that also has a parrying system that I feel does a lot better. So that's why I'm mentioning it here now. But otherwise, it's a Prince of Persia with this. I just finished watching some other top 10s where somebody was like, the story was trash. But I was like, I thought the story was good enough. It was better than it needed to be for this type of game. Like, it had characters that were okay, or pretty fun. But it did drop the ball on some certain characters. But overall, I thought the story was fine. And the length of the game was just about right. Kind of. You know, the real issue about it is it came out too expensive. This game was like $50 when it came out. And that was really... You can't do that, sadly. Do I think this game deserved to be $50? Maybe. I think if they had included... I know they have some DLC now, which I think gives a couple more stages or whatever. It extends out some of the story. Like, it's extra story content, so it is more gameplay. I think that only ended up as DLC because they didn't have enough time to put it in the main game. And it is DLC you have to pay for. And I don't, without knowing how long the DLC is, I bet if they had had that DLC in the main game, I might have been more comfortable with saying, yes, it was worth $50, its initial price. I ended up only paying like 25 or 30 for it, I think. I got it on discount, but I can't remember how much. I think I paid 25 or 30 bucks for it. And that feels about right. Even if it came out at 40 bucks, I see why it came out at that price. For how much content is in it and how good it looks. But the type of game that it is, you just can't get away with charging that much. Semi-sadly. This is just not the environment for a game like this. Metroidvanias just don't sell like that anymore. Let me put it that way. The price point is enough to scare too many people off. But all that said, the value is there. It's a good game. I recommend it pretty easily. But it's not going to break the top 10. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth is going to be in my top 10. I believe. I'm getting to the point where something might slip. Because I'm not counting as I go. I have a rough, but looking at where this is and knowing how many I have left down there, we'll see. There might be some cuts that need to be made. Because Dragon Dogmas 2 is going to be in my top 10. I think Final Fantasy VII is going to be at the end of my top 10-ish. Maybe. But people have turned around on this game so hard. Listening to other outlets and their top 10s, people just fucking hate Final Fantasy VII. And I don't know, I don't agree. And when I say hate, a lot of the discourse is it was too long and it has too much open world side bullshit for people. And the story ends up in a place that's really hard to understand and isn't fulfilling for people. I don't necessarily agree with all those points. I understand why people feel that way, but I just had like a good time. So I think it's going to be in my top 10, but it might slip depending on where the rest of this list goes. Animal Well is going to be in my honorable mentions, but just barely. It's almost just a mention. I don't really feel that strongly about Animal Well. I liked it. I liked what I played about it. I wish I'd loved it. It's a game that I wish would have been better. I had more expectations for it. And it does do some things. I am going to keep it as honorable mention because it's another Metroidvania, but with puzzles instead of combat, really. Along in the vein of like a Fez or what's another 2D puzzle game? I don't remember. But it's just okay. A good, solid, good one of those with a lot of extra puzzles and stuff you can do that take a whole lot more work to figure out, and you have to use like help from the community to figure it all out. And if you just beat it's one of those games where if you just get to the end and see credits, you've only seen like a third of all the content or 2/3 of all the content, and the real game starts then, and you have to start doing some real hardcore puzzle solving that I do not want to do. So just judging off of like the base experience of getting to credits and then saying that I'm done, it's an honorable mention, but barely. it almost was just like a mention of just like, and when I say that, it feels like somewhere between a 7 and an 8 out of 10. Let me put it that way. Like, it has no real big problems, but it also isn't super exciting to me. Like, I didn't really feel that genius, like that big galaxy brain solving anything in it, and you need that for a puzzle game for me to be really excited about it. Like, I need to feel like, oh man, that was a great puzzle. And I like some of the stuff that I figured out in Animal Well. It was kind of cute. There was a lot of cute things to figure out in Animal Well. But nothing that really felt mind-blowing. Like a Fez, or like or Tunic. That was the other game I was thinking about in terms of like puzzle-y games. Those games, wow. Amazing. Fantastic. Animal Well, solid, fine, good. And finally, last game, I feel like I missed some now, but maybe not. I think 9 Souls is going to make it into the top. Is that more than 10? We're going to find out together. That might be 11. But I think 9 Souls, I feel like I wanted to make my top 10, but now I'm going to have to make some cuts, I feel like. I think this is more than 10. Let's do the count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We got there perfectly, ladies and gentlemen. We did it. We did it. But before we start coming to the end here, we're on schedule for exactly like I said. This was going to be the part that takes the longest time. I think we're going to wrap up before 10 o'clock, but man, this was another year where it was a 4-hour stream. Nearly 4 hours, because I started a little bit late. Is UFO 50 going to make this list versus these front runners and the honorable mentions? So I didn't talk about Tactical Breach Wizards. I really love Tactical Breach Wizards, but I didn't finish it. I haven't finished it because it's a tactics game, and it's one of those things where, like, I sit down, I do a single level, and then I don't want to play any more Tactical Breach Wizards for the day. It is very hard for me to sit down and do multiple levels of it because of how much thinking you have to do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it also means that it is a game that, you know, drains me in a way that a lot of these other games don't. But that said, I fucking love Tactical Breach Wizards, mostly because the dialogue and the writing is the best of the year. In terms of, I'm going to say specifically, the dialogue is the best of the year. Any of these games, it's the funniest, even above, you know, thank goodness you're here, the comedy game. Tactical Breach Wizards, the characters, I love them all. The writing is that specific sweet spot of smart and snarky and sarcastic without being too much, without being self-deprecating. The overall concept is just like you're playing as a group of wizards in like military in the context of the military. So like your main character wizard is a seer. He can see the future slightly, but he's like a SEAL 7 whatever operator. SEAL 7 operator, but he's a wizard. He has a gun, but you barely ever use it, honestly. Like, direct damage from guns is barely what you're doing. He's the only one, really, with a straight-up gun, and you barely use it. He has the ability to slightly see in the future. He's like the old, grizzled veteran. And then your other main character is a storm witch, and she can only really push people around using her wind powers or her lightning powers. She can only push people around for the most part. So you're in top-down tactics situations where it's like you're on a grid and you have to take cover and you have to like defenestrate a lot of people. That means defenestration means blowing people outside of windows. You take care of a lot of enemies that way. It's not through a whole lot of just shoot a guy until you do enough damage and kill him. It's usually maneuvering stuff in the environment, using your different wizards' powers without getting into spoiling what the other wizards do, in order to get through stages tactically. And because your main character is a prophet, you can always rewind your turn after you do something that doesn't end up working. So you can always see what the ultimate, if you hit the end turn button, it shows you everything that happens if you hit the end turn button, and you can back up and redo anything that turn you want. But once you end the turn, you can't go back past that. That's the whole conceit. So that gameplay is really good. The tactics feel really good. It's like puzzle solving, but with like combat wise, and no notes, all great. The dialogue is what puts it over for me as being so fucking good. Every time the characters talk to each other, it's hilarious, and it's written so naturally, and it's so fucking good. That's the part that's very exciting to me, along with it being like a very good video game, like the actual gameplay also being very good. All of it comes together to make a game that almost makes my top 10 or is in my top 10. Maybe I should put that in instead of Final Fantasy. But I liked Final Fantasy. And Final Fantasy, as somebody who hasn't played Final Fantasy 7 before, I thought it was all really impressive. It looked really good. I'm liking where the story is overall. I think this is the best way for me to get the Final Fantasy 7 story compared to playing through the original, which I know a lot of people swear by, and they don't like the changes that have been made in this one. But I'm on board. I like these characters now because of the Final Fantasy 7 remake stuff. So for me, I just don't have as many problems with the Rebirth game as a lot of other people did. I didn't mind the side missions. I liked doing almost all of it, almost. And the stuff that I didn't like, I pretty much didn't have to, and still got most out of the game as I could. But everybody also knows what Final Fantasy 7 is. I haven't gone into the detail on it, but it's Final Fantasy 7, the second remake out of 3 of Final Fantasy 7. The second part of a 3-part remake, essentially. It's either that or UFO 50. These are at the bottom of my list. Ish. Nine Souls kind of is too, and I'll get into that, but these 3 are all maybe going to be bumped by one of these 2. And I need to get that decided before we start talking about the top 10 proper order. I think UFO 50 gets edged out. UFO 50 is a project that is more conceptually impressive than it is to play. I do like playing a lot of UFO 50. But the problem is, I don't know how much longer I'm going to be playing with it now that I'm past Game of the Year. I mean, I can always pop into it on my Steam Deck and have a good time. It's like my to-go thing where I can always just pop into a game and make some progress. But I don't know if I would have how much of that pull I'm going to have after this year, and that might be very telling compared to some of these other games on the list. I think I'm going to put... But, on the other hand, Tactical Breach Wizards I like a lot, and I just talked about how much I liked about it, but I'm probably honestly not going to finish it, or at least it's going to be a long time before I do. I don't know how close I am to the end of the game. I think I have all the characters. I think I'm about, like, it feels like I'm about 4/5 of the way through. Like, I feel like I'm almost to the end at this point. But I don't really know how much longer I have, so I don't know if I'm going to finish it. And that's still, you know, I've had, like, a long time to finish this game. And I didn't, which says something as well. And I don't really like the idea of having a game I didn't finish on my top 10. I mean, technically, I didn't finish UFO 50 exactly, but it's not really a game that you intend to finish that way. And In Stars in Time, I don't feel like putting on the list because I don't think it's this year, and I don't like having a game from last year in my top 10. Even if it is my list, it would have to be a game that I definitely want on my top 10, and this is barely scratching the bottom. So I think that is going to knock it down, even though I like it a lot. No, I think this is staying the way it is. I do think UFO 50 is good enough to be the number 10 game of the year. Some of those games are really fucking fun. It just doesn't feel like it because they're not games that you talk about with other people. They're not games where you can exactly... I mean, you can, but I'm not able to unless they actually play them. Like, I can tell people who haven't played Tactical Breach Wizards why that game is so good. I can't do that with UFO 50. You just gotta play it. You just gotta spend the time of going through the games yourself and going through that process of being like, wow, that game was a lot better than I thought it would be, or that game wasn't as good as I hoped it would be based on like what I saw of it. Like, but that's a fun process. So it's hard to describe why, but I think I feel in my heart of hearts that UFO 50 is my number 10 because it almost came off the list, but I think it deserves to be there. At the end of the day, I love Tactical Breach Wizards, but it just asks too much of me. Kind of. That's not really a criticism as much as just like I have to make a decision, and that's how I'm gonna edge that out. Okay, so let's get into the rest of this list. But I still have to say a decent little thing, and I intend to be done by 10 or earlier. Don't worry for people watching if you haven't already tuned out. I'm wrapping up. I'm doing my best. Don't rush me. Number 9 is gonna be one of these two. Maybe. Actually, we're going to do some vibe moves. These are all vibe moves. For me to get like a general, this is what I feel, but this is definitely not, this is what I feel. When I talk through it, I might have decisions to make. Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, since I've already talked about Final Fantasy VII, is the sequel to the newly established Like a Dragon branch of Yakuza games, which are also not called Yakuza anymore. The Yakuza name is gone. Like a Dragon is what it meant in Japanese, so now they're just calling it Like a Dragon across the board. But once they changed the name to Like a Dragon, they also changed protagonist over to Ichiban, who is here on the right. He is the main character of the new Like a Dragon games going forward. Kiryu is the old protagonist from the Yakuza games, which were like live, real-time brawlers, combat-wise. And Like a Dragon is now a turn-based, in this branch, a turn-based JRPG with live-action elements, without getting into the details. The thing that matters for my top 10... These are JRPGs, or this is a JRPG dealing with a lot of story stuff from... It obviously has both of them on the cover for a reason. It brings in Kiryu to pretty much wrap up Kiryu's story, and it brings in Kasuga, Ichiban Kasuga, to tell his next story and wrap them up together. In a game that takes place in Hawaii, which is super fun for the first time. The first time that the series has done anything outside of Japan for any length of time. And not only that, came to technically America, even if Hawaii is disconnected from like the mainland, so it has its own like culture almost and stuff, but it's still America. It's still English. Very fun in that way. It's super fun to see Like a Dragon shit happening in an American setting. The gameplay stays just as good as it's always been. Nice additions there, but the main thing that has it on the list, it might knock it down at the same time, is the story. Getting into spoilers, Kiryu is sick and is going to die soon. He has cancer, which is huge, story-wise. So a lot of this game ends up just being, man, Kiryu is about to die in his mind, or is told. And everybody wants him to go back into Japan and remember all the things that he's done throughout his life and give him a reason to try to fight off the cancer instead of just being like, I'll die when I'll die. So it's like a love letter to the entire rest of the series. And it is it not only flashes back and makes reference to everything from the very first Yakuza game throughout all 7 of the games. It makes references and flashbacks to things that happened, on top of wrapping up and going back to characters in those games and side quests that you can actually see, well, what are they doing now? Like, what happened to them after that game? It's characters we haven't seen or heard from in years. They do so much to give Kiryu a send-off that is like loves the rest of the series so much, but it kind of clashes with giving Ichiban his own game. It kind of takes away from his story as a result, which is a ding. Like that's a knock against it. It almost feels like they should, like, I get why they did it, but they really should have just done it in its own project. That all said, it still makes my top 10. It's a very long, good game that I like more than Final Fantasy. So I think it's set. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think this is where it belongs because of the knocks against it and Ichiban's story not being as good. Like, it doesn't end very well. It doesn't feel very, at the end of it, doesn't feel fulfilling or satisfying. That's the word I was looking for. It's not very satisfying, but it's good enough. Like, it ends. It has an ending. It's not bad, but it's not good enough. And Kiryu doesn't even really, like, it's not Kiryu. Kiryu's also ends in a little bit like a, this is not a high point for the overall story, in terms of, like, where it ends and the villains and stuff like that. So it's low on the top 10. I'm really thinking about whether or not I like it more than Final Fantasy. Oh man, this is getting hard. Because now I'm thinking about Dragon's Dogma 2, and I'm thinking about if that's as high as I have it. I don't think it is. Okay. Just so I can be able to talk about it and move it around. The quick version, I don't have to talk about this one as much. Dragon's Dogma 2 is mostly on this list as being really interesting meta-wise. So, Dragon Dogma 1 came out like a decade ago. Nobody really played it. It was solid. It was fine. But it had some issues and was overall didn't shake the world. Didn't make a big impression. But it was good enough to get like a semi-sequel or an expansion, and people liked it. It just had issues. Now we have Dragon's Dogma 2 all these years later. And Dragon's Dogma 2 is really a redo of Dragon Dogma 1. This is them being like, we have the technology now, we have the budget now, we can do what we wanted to do with Dragon's Dogma 1 proper, which is a open world fantasy action RPG of sorts. More action than RPG, really. With really interesting combat, really dynamic feeling combat, and I say that because the game makes it feel like you're doing shit in battles that may be a little bit more scripted than they seem. But even with that said, I still feel like the battle system is really fun and really interesting. The main knock against it is it doesn't have a big enough variety of enemies, and explaining for why it's so, I'm not going to get into it here in the top 10. That would be the time to do it, but really, if you're interested, I need to talk to you one-on-one about why Dragon's Dogma 2 is so interesting and amazing. But it's really good, and the shit that it pulls with its story, that I'm not going to spoil here for the same reason, is the reason it's on this top 10. It doesn't really have a good story, but the shit that happens in the story related to it being just Dragon's Dogma 1 but done properly is some of the most amazing shit that's happened this year, which is why it's on the top 10. But it doesn't have very good enemy variety. After you play it for a long time, you're fighting a lot of the same enemies over and over again. And the actual plot story that's happening in it is just fine. It's not bad. It's just fine. So I think overall, it needs to drop down a little. It needs to drop down here. but I still think it's so much more interesting, and it deserves to be, like, putting it ahead of a Final Fantasy game is making a statement, and that's the statement I want to make. This game is interesting with what it's doing in terms of being a video game, which I love so much. I always love being able to be like, bravo and applause for what you pulled off as a big budget, AAA budgeted game. What you did was some indie shit. Like, what you pulled with this game was shit that indie games do on the regular, but you don't see it at this level. Bravo. I think that's where I want it for that reason. But it doesn't beat out Like a Dragon's love letter to an entire series that I've played endless hours of. So I think that's where that goes. Is 9 Souls this high? Maybe not. So, quick go over 9 Souls. 9 Souls is another Metroidvania Souls-like. Go figure. But this one is not a Dark Souls Metroidvania. It is very much a Sekiro Metroidvania. The combat is all about parrying. You barely even have a weapon. Your main thing is parrying enemies and then exploding them with the energy that you built up off of parrying. So your main combat thing is parrying. That's how core to your combat parrying is. Just like Sekiro. And I love that shit. It feels good. And on top of that, it's a good Metroidvania. And it tells a pretty good story on top of that overall. Not the clearest, but not the hardest to follow either. It's just good and solid. And it feels really great. Looks really great. Great art style. It's not just anime generic stuff. It's like a very specific, interesting art style that's a little bit different. And it tells a really good story, and the combat is really super great. But is it this high? Actually, it might be. I didn't expect that. I thought it was going to be down here, but after talking about the rest of these games, I don't really have any huge negatives to say about 9 Souls. Like, each of these games, I can give you a reason why it's not making it higher. Because of a negative. But this is the first top 10 out of top 10 game that I'm just like, no. It's just about how much better these games are versus this game doing anything wrong. Not that it's perfect, obviously, but I don't have any huge criticisms. So I think this is where it goes on the list. No, I think that's it. That's where that's going to go. I like it. So it's not going to go lower. And I think this stuff is solid too. I think I feel good about this order. Right? Okay, yeah. Locked in. I'm not going to think about it any harder. In general, these two could be interchangeable based on the day, I feel. Like, you could convince me to swap these two in any direction. But for right now, this is locked. I feel good about this. Good job, 9 Souls. I didn't expect this. Now we have the top 5. We're almost done. 10 more minutes. Give me 10 more minutes. This is going to go quick because these are so good. And I have less story explanations to do overall. I think this is where Tekken 8 is going to go. I love Tekken 8. I fell in love with Tekken after Tekken 7. To me, Tekken 8 is overall better than Tekken 7. If I think about it. It's really going to come down to what future characters we get to really tell the tale for the future. I'm a little concerned after the guest character being, like, honestly, I don't, and it's not even about me having personal issues with the person they picked. It's a Final Fantasy character again. I've already forgot Clive. It's Clive, that's fine. But I know people are kind of turning on Tekken 8 now, in the discourse, in the FGC. Kind of for reasons I don't completely understand. Like the pros are kind of turning on Tekken 8, and everybody's kind of like shitting on it right now. There's been a big turn. It's both Street Fighter 6 and Tekken 8. Both games that I fucking love. Did Street Fighter 6 come out this year? It came out last year, right? It came out last year. And they're both getting kind of trashed on right now. In a way that I'm like, I kind of understand with Street Fighter 6. But even then, I think that game's still super good. But I don't play at that level to like have that strong of an opinion of it, I guess. And now people are doing the same thing to Tekken 8. I'm like, man, I don't have any problems with Tekken 8. Not really. I can understand the problems they say that they're having, but man, compared to Tekken 7, I think after the balance patch that just came out, I think Tekken 8 is just overall a better game. Single player, multiplayer, character selection, overall. Yeah, I like Tekken 8. This is where it's going. Maybe a lot of this list is already in the right order. No. I gotta be honest with myself. Balatra's gonna be at number 4. Right? I gotta be honest with myself. I gotta be really honest with myself. This is hard. Because, like, Balatro is amazing. I just don't know if it's that amazing for me individually. Not going to get into the explanation of Balatro a whole lot. It is a poker roguelike that is taking the world by storm. If you haven't heard about Balatro now yet, just play Balatro. Maybe that's the thing that makes me keep it kind of high on this list. It's just like, everybody should play Balatro. Everybody will probably like Balatro, at least, if not love it, if not get addicted to it. And that's kind of a big deal. But I think it's just because I fell off of Balatro, or I'm at the point where I played it so much that I didn't exactly burn out, but I don't have a clear path for why I would keep playing it. Like, I don't have a clear goal, or the one goal that I have is too hard, and I don't feel like switching a goal to something else that I want to do. But maybe if I just did that, then I'd probably... If you told me to, hey, pick up Balatro and play right now, there's hardly a time where I would say no. But I wouldn't necessarily do it again very often on my own. But that's it. No, it's gonna stay here. I think it's gonna stay there. Just realistically, Tekken 8 is not as fun with randoms, kind of, but it is though. I'm not gonna sit here and agonize over it just because of time, but I feel like Balatro, I do honestly want to give its... I played a lot of Balatro, and it's something that I'm always going to play from here on out, somewhat. I don't think I'm going to completely just be, like, done with Balatro anytime soon. Like, I'm going to continue playing a lot of it in 2025, especially if they come out with more content. So far, they've only been coming out with DLC, free cosmetic DLC, but no real big gameplay changes. But if they come out with more official content for Balatro, I'd jump back into it in a heartbeat, just like I do Vampire Survivors. So I think it stays in this spot. I think this is the spot for it. Let me do this to brighten my screen. I think this is the spot. I think I do like it. I think I will put it above Tekken 8. Because everything really from 9 Souls up doesn't really have any big negatives. I've just played so much Balatro, I've reached my personal end, but that's not because the game doesn't have enough to do. Anyway, let's wrap this up. I think the rest of this list might be in order. Although I've said that already. Let's go through game by game. Metaphor ReFantazio. The newest game from Atlus, even though it's been in development for 8 years, I think. And it's a new spin-off. It's the new third spin-off of the Shin Megami Tensei series, or the third pillar of the JRPG, Atlus JRPGs. Because Atlus does Persona, and it does Shin Megami Tensei. And Persona was already kind of a spin-off of Shin Megami in that it uses the same creature designs and library of creatures for both of those games. But Metaphor ReFantazio is a new third pillar that's not directly connected to any of those two games, either of those two games. It doesn't use any of the same creatures, kind of. There are references and connections, but not in the same way. It does enough new that it's its own third new thing. With a new first time overall medieval fantasy, but in a new anime world, but with like swords and knights in that kind of a setting, which normally, like I said, I don't like, but I think Metaphor does a really interesting new spin on it. And man, I just love Metaphor all the way through. The story is really cool. The characters are fantastic. Some of my favorite characters of the year. And gameplay-wise, I think the changes they make to the fighting system that they pretty much lifted from Persona, from the Persona series, the changes they made for Metaphor, just not perfected it, but in quality of life improvements across the board. It's deeper. It makes you do more in the combat. Like in the Persona games, you hardly ever have to use items. Or at least not all of them. You barely use anything besides healing items and revival items. But Metaphor makes you use pretty much everything. Like, the difficulty is tuned just right to make you take advantage of anything and everything you can. So I love that about the gameplay. The story and characters are great. The graphics are probably the biggest knock against it, or at least it's like, out of the list of things that are good about Metaphor, the graphics are kind of the least. They're still great, mostly because the creature designs and the world design and the race designs are all very interesting and cool. But the overall look of the game is a little bit musty. It's a little bit muggy. It's a little bit not nearly as crisp and clean and beautiful as Persona 5. I don't think it looks as good as Persona 5. In its own way. But it's almost like on purpose, because it's trying to go for like a certain vibe. So it's not like it's a bad looking game. It's just that the vibe that it's going for doesn't look as good to me as Persona 5, but it's still a perfectly fine looking game in all the ways that matter. So that all said, I think that's where it's gonna go. Really, it was me deciding if I like it more than Astrobot to take it to the top. Here's what I'm gonna do. I think that's it. Right? And here's why. Let's wrap this up. There's not a whole lot I can say about 1000X Resist. I'm not willing to spoil 1000X Resist here for this list. But 1000X Resist is the best video game story of the year. And only as more time has passed and my understanding of exactly what goes into this story, well, not exactly, but as I've heard more talk about it and had more understanding of it and more time to like ruminate on it, 1000X Resist is the best video game story of the year, bar none. Should have won best narrative at the Game Awards, but 1000X Resist is a pretty long, story-focused game, not really any gameplay to speak of. Next to no gameplay to speak of, but enough. It is a game. It's not just a walk. It's not just like a walking experience or whatever. There is enough game there for it to be a video game, but it's really about interactivity in the story to get the story. And it's a story that I don't think it could be told as I always like to reward. It's a story that would lose significantly if you tried to turn it into a movie or a book or any other kind of medium. It is a video game story that needed to be told through an interactive video game medium. And I always want to give the flowers to that as much as possible, because it's so hard to do, to meld the game and interaction with the story enough to make it not just be able to be told in like a big long movie. It's the problem with the Last of Us games. Or it's not the problem, but it's the reason why I don't consider those as high in certain aspects. But the story of 1000X Resist is just super long, super meaty, super complex, super deep, but it tells its story in a way that you completely understand. I'd say the average person who's used to playing these kinds of story-based games will come away at the end of the game understanding about 80% of what happened, which sounds like a knock, but that's only because like that 20% is stuff that you don't need to enjoy the game. It's only 20% of stuff that makes it even more impressive. So the more of that 20% you get from other sources makes that game just even better. And that's me going off of like that's where I feel like I ended up on like needing to have some of that filled in. And let me say that number is higher than most games in that vein that I've played. A lot of times I play games like that are very story heavy, indie story games, base games, and I will come away feeling like I got like 65 to 70% of the story that they were trying to tell, and I had to go, okay, now let me go watch a YouTube explainer about, here's the explanation of what happened at the ending of this video game. I did that with this game, but I didn't feel like I needed it. I felt like I got a good chunk of the story, even though it's a very complex story. It's not exactly complicated, there's just a lot going on. But the way that the game uses interactivity and tells the story out of order makes you be able to understand it, because you are experiencing it in the same way that the main character you're playing as is experiencing it, and you're able to absorb it in the same way. So fucking amazing. Without getting into spoilers at all about what the story's about, just know that it's the best story of the year, bar none. But the reason I put metaphor above it is because I think the metaphor story is not as good, but it has gameplay that is some of the best gameplay in a turn-based JRPG of its type that I've played. So the two is like a story that's not quite as good, but gameplay that is super good, really great. Improving on a system that I didn't think you could improve on this much. And then Astrobot, my top game of the year. Pure video game bliss. It's not the best in any single category. It looks very good. I don't think it's the best looking game this year, but it looks fantastic. It plays like a dream. It feels great. I don't know if it's the most impressive feeling gameplay this year. It's a relatively simple platformer that's very tight and feels super great, and has a lot of ideas that don't wear out their welcome by the time you're done with the game. But it's not necessarily the best platforming I've ever played. It is a combination of 9 out of 10s in a lot of different categories without ever hitting 10 in any single category. But on top of that, wrap in the fact that it's all couched in this nostalgia for the PlayStation brand and old PlayStation games. And for somebody like me who's been playing games as hardcore as I have for this long, for you to go back and make a game that's pretty much a love letter to all of these games that nobody's even heard of, and make references to them and love letters to so many different games. Not just one, but so many different games. Hundreds and hundreds of games from PlayStation's history. And combine that into a game that, even if you didn't do those references, would be a really fantastic game on its own. I don't think those references are necessary for Astro Bot to be as good as it is, but it definitely puts it over the top for me to make it my game of the year, which was not a given when I started this list. I still feel like that's the case, though. I think Astro Bot is a video game-ass video game. Like, you don't always need a great story to have an amazing video game. If you just have a game that does the thing that video games do best, which is gameplay. If you have good, solid-ass gameplay, and you just make a person feel like they're having fun, it is just a game that is fun. And it's so hard to make a game that is just pure fun, nonstop. It's not perfect, but it doesn't have almost any faults. So I'm gonna make it my #1 game of the year. I don't think Metaphor is not gonna beat it. I like Metaphor a lot, but visually, Astro Bot beats Metaphor, I think. And the story isn't perfect in Metaphor. The story for me had some hitches, not enough to make it obviously it's the second best game of the year, but these small hitches are the thing that make it not the game of the year. Astro Bot I love from beginning to end, and I did 100% of Astro Bot. I mean, I technically have some trophies left to go back and get, but it's just one of those things where I just know I can go back and get them anytime, and I'm not really that big on platinuming, but if I needed to platinum it, I probably would put in another hour or two of work, and then I'd be done. So I've done 100% of Astro Bot, practically, or let me say I've done 95% of Astro Bot, and I never got tired of it for the most part all the way through. And they're going to put out more DLC levels, most likely. I will look forward to doing all of those too. Astro Bot, game of the year. Let's go down the list and wrap this up a little bit after 10 o'clock, but not too long. I didn't keep you guys for too extra. We're going to wrap up at just about the 4-hour mark, just like I expected, or just like previous years. Our top 10 games of 2024 are: number 10, UFO 50. Number 9, Final Fantasy VII Remake or Rebirth. Number 8, Dragon's Dogma 2. Number 7, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Number 6, Nine Souls. Number 5, Tekken 8. Number 4, Balatro. Number 3, 1000 Times Resist. Number 2, Metaphor ReFantazio. And our top #1 game of the year is Astro Bot. Thanks for watching. Thanks for going on this journey with me. Thanks for celebrating a great year for media, at least for video games. I think this was a very strong video game year. Considering how heavy my top 2 tiers are compared to the bottom tiers, I mean, obviously there's a lot of games that I just don't start if I know they're not going to be great. But even then, I really liked a lot of stuff, even in the honorable mention section. Even if it didn't crack the top 10, you could almost look at this as a top 30, which is saying a lot. This is a really great year. Thanks for watching. If anybody wants to hit me up about any of this, that you may be interested in, if you want to know more about how to play some of this stuff, what price I think you should aim for in playing some of this, because I wouldn't recommend everybody go out and buy Metaphor for $70 necessarily. It's going to change from person to person. So, for example, a lot of these, if you're all right, I might play that now that you've explained how high it is on your list, but what should I pay for it? I'm willing to do those kind of suggestions or whatever. Thanks for watching. Let me let you guys get out of here. Let me get out of here. I still want to play some games before I go to sleep, even though it's relatively early for me, but I've talked for 4 straight hours. So thanks for watching. I'm going to start streaming again probably soon. Looking into 2025, nothing's gonna really happen in January that's big. January is usually my cooldown month to just play whatever the fuck I want after spending so much time squeezing in games right in December all the way up until the end. So I'm going to chill out in January and prepare for the rush of games that come out in February, including Like a Dragon spin-off with Majima, which is going to be super fun, and the next Monster Hunter, which is going to be huge. So I'm going to be busy again in February, but I think I'm going to... A friend of mine asked me actually to stream when I start playing Monster Hunter. So that might be the time when I start streaming again. But I might, on a whim, stream some stuff in January too, depending on how I feel. So be on the lookout. It's been cool. Thanks for watching. And here's looking forward to, hopefully, it'll be rough. Here's looking forward to 2025 and hopefully an okay, not horrible year, I think is the best we can hope for with the way of the world right now. But without getting into any of that, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.